Welcome to Living 4D with Paul CZECH. Today's guest is Michael Holt. Michael is a holistic health practitioner, a former competitive fighter with rank in several martial arts systems, an executive protection specialist and professional bodyguard, and a dedicated meditation practitioner and teacher. Combining training modalities from martial arts, meditation, Eastern philosophy, traditional Western fitness, energetic polarity training, masculine-feminine archetypal embodiment, and breathwork, he has unified his passions into a progressive wellness system designed to increase vitality and deepen consciousness.
Hi, everybody. I've been lecturing and teaching professionally since 1988, and as you can imagine, have taught literally thousands of students through the CHEK Institute's workshops and advanced training programs, not to mention many hundreds of lectures worldwide. Though the students stream through like water running through my fingers, occasionally there is an enlightened soul among them. It's easy to tell who they are by the level of attentiveness, the still point behind their eyes, and how they handle challenges and the questions they ask of me in class. Michael Holt ended up in my holistic lifestyle coaching program for the first time 8 years ago. And when he was sitting before me, I could tell immediately that he was not the ordinary student. He asked a lot of questions, good questions. When he entered HLC 2, our initial advanced training program for professional holistic lifestyle coaching, I could see his mind going into deep meditation as I shared the God model I teach, which is a non-denominational, spiritually based model for understanding love, life, and all that is. It wasn't long into the training that Michael began posting questions and challenges to my model based on what he'd learned from the various masters he's studied with, such as the famous Buddhist monk and scholar Shinzen Young. These are the moments in class that I truly love because I get an opportunity to dive deep enough to excite my spiritual juices and take everyone in class for a ride. Since that time, Michael has continued his ongoing mastery of martial arts, has attended numerous long meditation retreats, silent retreats, completed HLC 3 training twice to master it, as well as engaging many masters and enlightened minds. In this informative podcast, Michael and I look at the yin and yang of martial arts and explore some of the key teachings that have impacted him spiritually. And we made sure to offer you pearls of wisdom and simple practices you can engage for your own spiritual, conscious growth and development. I hope you enjoy spending time with Michael Holt as much as I do. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Living 4D with Paul CZECH. Hello. Today I have a very interesting guest for you, Michael Holt. Michael Holt, I first met in one of my HLC classes, and that was, how long ago do you think, Michael?
6 or 7 years, I believe.
Yeah, cool. And I figured out something quite quickly about Michael, aside from the fact that he looks like a total badass and he's covered in tattoos. He asks very deep questions. I immediately thought, okay, this guy's been doing a lot of deep study, and he's got that look of the madman in his eyes, like someone who sits under trees and meditates for 20 days at a time. And so through chatting with him, I found out that he has studied with all sorts of different spiritual teachers, some of which I know. I know one for sure, Shinzen Young, which is cool. And so we were getting into the God model, and Michael was asking a lot of really deep questions, and I like that a lot. And then when he was on the breaks, he'd be doing Tai Chi and all sorts of cool martial arts type movements. And so I've just kind of kept touch with Michael over the years, and he connected me with Shinzen Young for our podcast, which I was very grateful for. Thank you.
My pleasure.
And he's done lots of long, deep meditation retreats and things in his career. So I'm excited to share Michael with you, and we're going to talk today about a variety of things. And Michael runs men's groups, and he's done a lot of work, as I said, with different spiritual teachers. And he and I are going to talk about manhood and just a few neat things. But first of all, welcome to Living 4D, Michael.
Thank you so much, Paul. I am so happy to be here.
Right on. Welcome to the rainbow.
Yeah, it's beautiful, man.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
I'm excited to be here every day myself. I wake up in prayer. I go to bed in prayer and live in awe to be here. And so, you mentioned to me previously in our exchanges that you came from a troubled past. And I think that's how most of the great healers and shaman come into the world. I'd love it if you can give us an autobiographical overview of your life, the challenges you faced, and what ultimately brought you to realizing that in order to heal, you had to take the reins and get involved yourself.
Yeah. So I was born and raised in the suburbs of Philadelphia, blue collar neighborhood, and you know, a good family. Always had food on the table and everything. But as I matured and developed in my early teens to late teens, I was very rebellious, and I got myself into a lot of trouble drinking and fighting, and I didn't know at the time, but it was all coming from this deep, well of emotional pain that I didn't have the tools to confront or sit with or be with. So I would get shit faced and find someone else who was just like me, and get in a fist fight with them. And this played out for a number of years, and I got in a lot of trouble with the law. And
I'm surprised your nose is so straight.
yeah, I'm tall.
Yeah, you are. Yes, I've had 4 broken noses, and fortunately, when I quit boxing, it sort of kind of leaned out and didn't look so bad. But my nose used to be thick, and my eyebrows were thick from getting hit so much, and so I'm glad you got out of it without.
Well, you're pretty now.
Well,
Yeah.
Thank you. I don't think of myself that way, but I'll take it.
Yeah. So a string of trouble, and I think the last time I got in trouble, I was in a high-speed chase, and it was kind of a rock bottom moment. Like, I think my mentality at the time was, one day this is going to sort itself out. This is my rambunctious youth, and one day it'll just resolve itself. And I had this epiphany that it ain't going to happen, man. You got to get right with the man in the mirror and have a look at some things. Why are you behaving this way?
I want to take you backwards, though. You never told us what this emotional pain was coming from. So you left us with a cliffhanger.
Yeah. I think it was a culture of not really being educated with regard to emotional intelligence. Don't express your pain. Keep that to yourself. Boys don't cry, kind of thing. And then that reaches a crescendo where you get in a high-speed chase with the cops.
Mm-hmm. You see, I didn't stop with the high-speed chases.
Yeah.
I used to pride myself in outrunning the cops. When I first saw Starsky and Hutch, I go, they got nothing over me. I do that for real. And I used to take buddies out in my cars, and we would specifically go looking for speed traps to run them at 100+ miles an hour and then keep going. And fortunately, I've only been caught a couple of times.
I've heard the story of you getting caught, and that's what I've always loved about you. You have your own badass history, and you are the way you are now. It took you quite a lot of work to become that, and so that's the kind of individuals that I gravitate toward.
It's probably healthier to do that than the guys that are still running from the cops.
Yeah,
there's plenty of them out there, even at our age. Well, I'm older than you, but still, even at your age, they're still doing it. What was the nature of the programming environment?
Catholic schoolboy.
Yeah, so that
Yeah.
sort of, I was curious. I had a suspicion there would be some religion in there. What?
Irish Catholic. Alcohol is a big part of things. I had to struggle with alcohol when I was young because that was what I know now is that was my strategy for emotional regulation. But that's not a good emotional regulation strategy. That tends to create more problems than it solves.
Yeah, it's sort of a great numbing tool, but it doesn't fix anything. It's like,
And then when you get yourself good and drunk, how you really feel comes out.
yes, and
Yeah.
they call it courage juice for a reason. That's why
Yeah.
so much violence is with alcohol. That's one of the reasons it's so legal, because it helps support nationalism, and they don't want soldiers smoking pot or doing psychedelics at all. But you
Right.
can drink yourself shitless because they send you out and you go kill a commie for mommy.
Doesn't make any sense, man.
So this obviously. All this fighting led you to a lot of martial arts studies with various masters. I'd love to hear about your journey through the martial arts, and I've got a series of questions. So we'll start with the first one. My experience with martial arts is that most males and females that engage the training are primarily driven by fear and insecurity. Many have been wounded by their fathers, bullied in school or in their neighborhood, feel small within themselves, or have an inferiority complex. and think martial arts as a means of proving something to others. I'm wondering what the impetus for your study of martial arts was.
Yeah, I would totally agree with your summation for the vast majority of people who find their way into the dojo. And I wasn't aware of it at the time, but that was totally true for me. It was a deep insecurity and a fear of people and a wanting to bolster up this image and actually cultivate the skills that I could fuck people up. And that was my motivator in martial art for, a solid 5 or 6 years. I had also found teachers like Shinzen, and so I was meditating and deepening my practice and starting to understand myself at a deeper level and touching that fear and that insecurity. And as I started to really sit into that and sit with it and metabolize it and free myself of it, I noticed that my motivation to train, it wasn't really there. So I stopped training for a little while. But then something called me back. And I came back to martial art with new eyes. It wasn't about combat. It wasn't about being a tough guy in the room. It wasn't about even self-defense. It was just about moving my body in interesting ways.
It's good for that, for sure.
Yeah, and cultivating reflexes. And I found things like sparring or specific drilling patterns to be very meditative.
I've worked with all sorts of elite athletes, as you know, and I used to work with a lot of the DC Shoe athletes because, Danny Way and Damon and Ken Block were the owners of DC Shoe, and Danny, being Damon's brother, was everybody pretty much knows my history with Danny. But one of their athletes, there was a twins from Australia, Tass Pappas, and I can't remember his brother's name, but I think it was Tass that came to me, and he had a blown PCL on one knee and a blown ACL on the other knee, completely torn. And I did a toe touch drill test on him, with a target grid. Have you ever seen the toe touch drill with a target grid? And this guy with two completely wrecked knees was able to squat ass to heel and make every point on that target on both legs, which I've never seen any human being do in my life, even with perfect knees. And the first thing I said to him is, "You must have a background in martial arts." And he looked at me and smiled. He said, "Yes, my father's a kung fu instructor, and I spent my whole life in the dojo doing kung fu and training." So it immediately gave me the understanding of how he had these amazing motor skills and could do crazy, crazy things on a skateboard. But point being, you do learn a lot of wide variety of movement skills in martial arts, and I think that's
it's the
missing.
cultivation of an intelligent body.
Yes, it's a movement intelligence for sure. What are some of the different martial arts masters you've studied with, and what did they teach you that helped you heal and grow?
Well, my primary teacher is Dan Inosanto, Guru Dan. He's based in Marina del Rey, and he's like a preeminent Filipino martial arts instructor in the world. And I found him very much by coincidence. But I remember walking into his academy, and I tested a few other martial arts schools before then, and I just felt, okay, this is the vibe. Because it wasn't very macho. There was good, highly skilled martial artists there, but there was a kind of this feeling of peacefulness.
That's good.
And the exploration of martial art as an exploration of a culture. So he's Filipino himself, so he tracks a lot of Filipino students, but anyone who's interested in Filipino martial art from all over the world knows who Dan Inosanto is. So it's kind of a cultural melting pot of people from all over the world, and that's when I started to think, wow, this isn't about fighting. This is about connecting with other humans who are interested in this, developing friendships, having fun, and learning how to move.
What's the style called?
It's called Kali. It's also called Filipino martial art. It's also called Arnis or Eskrima. They're all names for the same system. Obviously, it comes from the Philippines, and it's primarily a weapon system, sticks and bladed weaponry.
And that explains why I always see you in the parking lot with all your sticks and bladed weaponry.
Yeah. But the interesting thing about Kali is the first thing they'll teach you is how to move with a double stick. And it's cognitively demanding.
Sure.
Because one hand is doing the other thing,
Yeah,
and then you add the footwork, and it's like
being a drummer.
Exactly. And drummers tend to excel in Filipino martial art because they have that cross patterning already.
Yeah.
But the cool thing is you start with the double stick, and then you learn that actually the movement is the weapon. So you might have one stick, you might have two sticks, you might have a knife, you might have a rolled up magazine, you might just have your empty hand, but it's the movement that you're learning. So whatever you have in your hand, or if you have nothing in your hand, you can implement weaponized movement. But in addition to that, I also trained Muay Thai kickboxing for quite a while, and there's another art called Pencak Silat, which comes from Indonesia. Kali and Silat they're born on battlefields, so they're very reality based. Muay Thai is obviously a sport that's governed by rules, but then to balance that out, because if you extrapolate all martial arts on the continuum of martial art, Muay Thai, Kali, and Silat are very martial. But I also train Qigong and Tai Chi, which are very art. So it teaches you how to just relax your body and move fluidly. But that influences the movement in Muay Thai and Kali. So it's like the soft and the hard.
Yeah, another way that those arts are broken down is offensive and defensive. Tai Chi is considered a defensive art, for example, and external and internal. Tai Chi and Qigong are considered internal martial arts by various experts. The name Kali, does it have any connection to the Hindu goddess Kali?
Does not.
It's interesting, though,
Yeah.
because when you see all the weaponry and the types of movements you're doing, if you've seen the pictures of Kali, right?
Of course,
With
yeah.
all of her arms moving in a circle, and she's holding one of her lovers'
Male heads.
heads. In her
Yeah, and she
hand.
squatted down on another dead guy.
Yeah. So I thought maybe there might be a connection there. But Kali's actually quite beautiful when you study what she's really about.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Awakening men from unconsciousness
Yes.
by any means necessary.
Yeah, she's really an expression of the divine feminine. And any man that's got any experience with women knows who runs the show very quickly, or they're probably not awake yet. So what... my observation is that a lot of martial arts teachers and instructors and even so-called masters today lack spiritual development.
Mm-hmm.
Can you share what your various teachers taught you about the relationship between martial arts and life, and how that either that was spiritual for you, or how your masters educated you so that the training had a spiritual teaching or message to support your life?
Yeah, Guru Dan, he doesn't really give explicit examples of things like that. But as I've gotten to know him and been around him for years, I can see that the way he presents combative movements, even though the movement itself can be quite violent, he doesn't really harp on that side of things.
Mm-hmm.
And he has an amazing quote, something to the effect of, training is not to hurt the person in front of you or out of hatred for the person in front of you. It's for love for the people behind you. You train so that you can be healthy, so that you can protect your loved ones, so that if something happens, you can influence a peaceful outcome. So his way of being is very gentle. He's a very sweet old man. And that's just transmitted from being around him.
That's how Kung Fu was developed. That's why it was developed, because the monks kept getting attacked by the bandits and people get robbed and beat up. So they decided they needed an art that would allow them to disable people without hurting them, to protect themselves and the people they loved, each other.
I've also heard it said, I think it was Dhammo that came from India to China to spread the practice of contemplation through Buddhism. And what he found was a bunch of kind of pudgy, sleepy monks. So he wanted to whip them into the shape so that they could maintain wakefulness during the sitting periods through exercise. So that was the birth of Kung Fu.
Okay, yeah. There might be legendary stories.
Sure, yeah.
I have a whole bunch of books on martial arts and the history of martial arts and the martial arts masters in my library, and I look at them more because I'm interested in their spiritual concepts and the mechanisms of breathing and different things that they use. Unfortunately, most of them have breathing backwards as far as how it works with the movement of the body, which is classic throughout exercise books all over the world. Even spiritual development books that have exercises, I've never seen one yet that had the breathing timed to the movement sequences that correlate with that cycle of breathing,
right?
Unfortunately. But I guess that in the long scheme of things isn't that critical.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for listening to the podcast. The fact that you're here is evidence that you're searching. You're looking into the possibility of bettering yourself, improving the lives of those around you, and maybe even the world. Maybe you're looking for some like-minded people to share the journey with you. That's great, and I hope you're finding all of that here and even more. But feeling a sense of belonging can only get you so far. Getting involved and making a real contribution is what sparks true responsibility and meaning in our lives. That's why I founded the CHEK Academy and created an educational system that can help anyone become an elite, well-paid holistic health professional, regardless of prior experience. I created the Academy for people just like you. It's for busy people, people with commitments, people who want to make a change in their lives and a real difference in their clients' lives and the world. And you can build the skills you need and still honor your job and commitments because the Academy is all about quality over quantity. You can complete all of our educational materials within as little as 5 hours a week and begin to practice your new skills immediately. I've designed the lessons to be that digestible for any student. Plus, you'll have the support of exclusive online workshops, group mentor calls, and of course, your fellow students. It's everything you'll need to become a world-class holistic health practitioner and a real difference maker in the lives of those around you. Go to chekinstitute.com/academy. That's chekinstitute.com/academy to apply and get a free consultation with our career advisors and learn more. Applications are open until November 15th, but I may have to close it down earlier because we've had a lot of applications and there are limited seats in the Academy. We try to keep the class numbers down so that there's a lot more instructor contact and better depth and penetration of learning. Thank you, and I look forward to seeing you in the Academy, where we achieve personal well-being and share our love and wisdom with the world.
Getting into spiritual development, spirituality and spiritual development are words or concepts that in the West at least lack any sort of a unified concept in the mind of the public. So before we get into your pathways of spiritual development, I'd love it if you could define for the audience and for me, what specifically do you mean if you use the word spirituality or spiritual development or spiritual, just so that we all know exactly what Michael means, because it's like God, for example. People think they're talking about the same thing, but inevitably we find out that we're not. So what is spirituality to you, and what is spiritual development?
That's a great question. One of my teachers, I've heard him say, it's the commitment to being a good person no matter what happened to you. Putting your foot down and saying, okay, I'm going to heal myself, get better, and then through my practice, become a refuge for other people who are struggling. So I would say that it's that commitment. Also, it is the practice of inviting latent capacities that are our birthright as human beings to come more online.
Yeah.
Intuition, compassion, joy, empathy, love. These are all available to us if we choose to practice them. And what I'll often say in my men's groups and even with my private clients is that there's no option not to practice. We're always practicing something. Yeah. Every moment of every day, you're getting more efficient at something. So the spiritual path or spiritual development could maybe become aware of what you're practicing.
Yes.
Determine if that's helping you or hurting you and the people around you.
Yeah.
And then maybe choose to practice something that feels good.
Yeah, I think practice is a tricky word there because a lot of this is unconscious programming.
Right.
So it's really just sort of a knee-jerk reactions to internal triggers. But when you bring these unconscious triggers and behaviors up into conscious awareness, then most people have to do what you did or what I did. They get to the point where they're in so much pain, they have to figure out a better way. And, I'll never forget when my brother committed suicide. His suicide note said, "I'm leaving because no matter how hard I try, I can't stop hurting the people that I love the most." And, him and I came from the same melting pot. It's just he didn't have an affinity for sports like I did, and I found all combat sports, and motocross was really a big savior for me. But boxing, kickboxing, football, and motocross were vehicles that I released my anger and my frustration, and they really, as you know, require tremendous focus. Motocross requires as much focus as any martial art if you want to win and you want to stay alive.
Yeah, if you want to stay alive, that's what I was thinking.
So, it's great for kids with fast minds because you're moving very fast. But my brother had no attraction to, he hated losing so bad, he found it better just not to get in because he had a really bad temper. But my point is that a lot of us realize that the strategies that we're using consciously or unconsciously are creating not only pain for ourselves, but pain for the very people we love, and it's like many, many people are aware of the fact that they said something to someone or did something to someone or hurt somebody, and they knew before they were going to do it that they shouldn't do it, but they couldn't stop themselves. And you hear people say, I don't know why I did that. I don't know why I did that. And they're upset at themselves, but they saw it coming and they couldn't stop it.
They couldn't stop it.
That's the power of
that momentum starts moving,
Yeah.
and it's tough to stop unless you have cultivated a tremendous amount of
awareness.
Yeah. Shinzen says often, we have 0.3 of a second before the terrorists take the building. So something happens, and unless you're right here in the moment on the button, you can't prevent your mind from making an awful suggestion and then following through with it. And they say, oh, why did I say that? Why did I do that?
Yeah, the Dalai Lama in his emotional teachings talks about how there's the trigger, and he says usually most people are not developed enough to respond at the trigger phase. Then there's the reaction or the experience of it, and then there's, and I'm paraphrasing because it's been years since I read the specific books that I'm referring to, but so there's the trigger, then there's the reaction or the response, and then there's the aftermath.
Damage control.
Yeah, and he says it takes quite a lot of training and real awareness practice to get to where you can recognize the trigger and modify your response so it's more toward equanimity and harmony before you get swept away. And most people don't really have the conscious awareness to make positive changes until they're in the aftermath.
Being with the trigger takes a tremendous amount of awareness and equanimity, being with discomfort.
Yes, and it takes a real committed effort because an unconscious program runs reflexively. It's like a reflex, right? Mm-hmm. Someone touches your sore spot, and before you even realize what you did, you've said or done something that might get you,
in a high-speed chase with the cops,
or get you put in jail, or end up you not having anyone that wants to sleep with you for quite a while, or maybe leaves you. And I know I've worked on this a lot because I'm sort of a dragon inside, and I grew up in a wild house full of violence, and it just took me a long time to, I told you earlier about my boxing story, and I won't go through the whole thing again, but because I talked about it on my podcast with Sean O'Malley and Tim Welsh, who I'm excited are coming out to see me again, so that's exciting.
Yeah, great guys, man.
Yeah, I love them. So, it's just like you get to the point where you realize, wow, if I don't do something to manage this dragon living inside of me, it's, I'm not only... See, the thing is, every time we hurt someone else, we hurt ourselves,
sure.
Right? We're all empathetic creatures. We're all really, at a deep level, there's a knowing in us that we're really part of the same consciousness. Most people don't know that consciously, but that's why it's so hard for us to watch anybody be hurt. Right? A society is very sick when it likes to look at the news and see people being, trashed by violence, or
if it bleeds, it leads.
Yeah, and that just goes to show you how out of touch we are with our own morality. But it's hard for most sane human beings to see other people get hurt, and when we if you study mirror neurons in the brain, it's almost impossible for us to see someone else in pain without our body
Wince.
reacting
Yeah.
with the same sort of sense of connection, which is a very important form of empathetic connection, is that seeing facial gestures, body postures. We all know when someone's depressed by the way they stand. They don't even have to talk. And I know that I've had to work very, very hard, and also, if you run a business, you have to be careful, because one of the things that I've seen that concerned me a lot, when I was in the military, I was in the 82nd Airborne Division, as you know, and it's just, there's a lot of, fiery, angry, badass, street fighter types that, are happy to go kill somebody, and they can't wait to go do it. And you see, joining the military like that, you're just itching for a war so you can go trash somebody and blast the shit out of everything. And it's really sort of like medicating your disease. But it's not medicating it. It's just really fortifying it. But the government makes a lot of money off that. So I saw a lot of violence because the training can get very intense, and the instructors are, this is back in the early 80s when I was in. So from what I've been told, they've softened it up a lot because there was quite a lot of violence. I mean, it was normal for them to slap you around, push you, spit on you, talk shit to you, tell you they shagged your mother last night, and all sorts of interesting things, because their goal is to really get you wound up. And so they're trying to get you to react against them, right? Because they're testing your ability to honor authority and many other head games. Plus, they're putting you into a state of total chaos so they can reprogram you. And I saw how many of the guys in not only the training, there's no women around, but when they're back at home and you're in your normal battlefield environment, which a daily training environment. But I was in a 0-1 priority unit, which means you're the first one to go to war. So it's always intense every day. You never know when you're on your way to war, and they keep you jacked up so that you don't get soft, and lots of drills where you're being pushed to the edge of yourself and irritated, and you think you're going to war, and you sit on a runway that's 110 degrees with a canteen of water, and you're sweating your ass off, and the airplanes don't come, and they do shit to you to kind of toughen you up mentally. So what happens is, at the end of the day, a lot of guys go home and they're very abusive to their wife and kids.
Right.
So
they don't know how to step out of that.
No. Yeah.
And they're not given the tools, unfortunately.
They're not given the tools, and they don't want them to have the tools because it softens them up too much.
Yeah, that's the problem. This idea that turning toward one's pain is soft. That's the big problem.
Yeah.
Because in my life, I can see that is actually the highest calling of courage. And the more men summon the courage to turn toward their pain and heal it and liberate it, the better off the world is. Otherwise, we have, like you say, adult male children running around vomiting their trauma on other people.
Yes. And, I saw this all through my martial arts training and my boxing training, and I'd see guys go out and get drunk and just beat the shit out of people in the bar that don't have a chance against a highly trained fighter, but they just they grew, what we would call adult martial arts skills, but they stayed in the body of a disgruntled teenager.
That's dangerous.
Yeah, it is. So that was always a concern for me, but
I think for the evolved martial artist, the greater one's capacity and violence becomes, the greater responsibility one carries to maintain peacefulness.
Yeah.
To never put your hands on somebody else. And I think that the utility of cultivating those skills is that it enables you to remain calm in a potentially hostile situation.
It does.
And influence a peaceful outcome. And I've had the opportunity to do that a few times in my life. I could not have done it if I didn't have the training. But because I had the training, I didn't have to use the training. That's the paradox. Yeah.
There's been many situations in my life where, somebody got up in my face and started, threatening me and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
In my youth, I would have
Easy. 1, 2, good night. Yeah.
Would have just
And been happy for the opportunity.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was never the kind of guy that went around looking for it, but if someone wanted to test me, I was like, I'm ready for you, pal. Let's
Sure.
rock and roll. My father was so scary. I've never met a man that scared me after that. I mean, my dad was 6'4", 220 pounds, a professional rodeo rider, and one of the strongest, fastest men I ever met in my life, and very dangerous. And so, even when I was in martial arts and boxing, there's a lot of guys that could hurt you and all that, but none of them had the killer instinct that my stepfather did. So in other words, all my life I've never run up against a man that made me as scared as my dad. So once you've lived with a dragon like that, my father was like living with a grizzly bear. You feel pretty stable. In other words, I didn't feel like where a lot of guys would have felt really threatened and reacted with some kind of violence or whatever. I had the capacity to kind of just wait it, calm it, and not be reactive. And also, when you're well trained and you know what you can do, you also, I know you know this for sure, you can smell when someone's really capable fighter. There's a certain air about them.
It's a vibe. It's a posture. It's a coolness.
It's an inner.
Yeah.
It's an inner.
It's easy to spot.
Yeah, it's an inner. I would say, I don't even know the word for it, but it's you can see into the eye of the storm, and there's a stability running through their accents.
Yes.
That you know that it's going to take a lot to provoke that person, but if you do, you're going to unleash a tornado of massive proportion. And I've met with and trained with and been in the ring with plenty of them, and believe me, when you do unleash that storm, it's something that you may not make it home from.
I think the difference is someone like that doesn't have anything to prove. They know themselves. And so the posturing that you see, I told you I worked in nightclub security for 10 years. So the posturing that you see, oh, fuck you, fuck me, no, fuck you. If you can pretend you don't understand the English language, it's just two baboons. It's silly. And the guys who know what they're doing don't engage with that. They say, okay, you're going to go, we're not going to go.
Yeah.
I'm here and I'm ready. And that is enough to not want to engage someone like that.
Yeah. My buddy I was telling you about in the gym, Lloyd Anderson, who was 5'7" and fought at 132, and he was 132 pounds soaking wet. He actually won the world title at the, I think, flyweight or bantamweight 116. I think it's bantamweight if I remember right. So he won the world title at 116, which he had to starve himself to get down to. He was the Canadian lightweight champion. But he actually worked as a bouncer in one of the big clubs in the town that I was from. And, all sorts of guys would start, getting lippy with him. And I'm like, Jesus, these guys have not got a clue what they're dealing with right now.
Right.
And there's some very good stories about men that push the wrong button.
So I was in that line of work for quite a while. Eventually, I just had to hang up my bouncing flashlight because it just didn't fit the lifestyle anymore.
No.
I was starting to evolve, and late nights around drunk people.
I was just going to say the environment's just...
start to become more sensitive and
caustic.
Feel that, But before I stopped, I started to get very fascinated with what we're describing. Because if you work at a door, you're going to encounter people that are hostile and potentially violent. But I started to become familiar with the subtle energy that I could find in my eyes and my face and my breath that would diffuse a situation. And that's when I started really thinking, wow, this goes very deep. It ain't about punches and kicks. It's about a vibration that communicates simultaneously. I am capable of hurting you, and I don't want to hurt you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Many people tell me they don't have time to eat well or can't afford organic foods, and I ask them how much time and money they've spent seeing doctors, sitting in waiting rooms, and standing in lines at drugstores. I also ask them if they realize that research shows that the average person or animal eating organic foods tends to reach satiation about 30% sooner than those consuming commercial foods, which means you don't need to consume as much food on an organic diet. not to mention the increased toxicity gained from consuming commercial foods. One of my first suggestions is to try Organifi's juice mixes. Organifi green juice nourishes, energizes, and detoxifies the body. Organifi red juice helps increase energy naturally, enhances fat metabolism, and slows the aging process as part of a holistic lifestyle. Organifi Gold induces calmness, relaxation, and aids recovery from stress and exercise. But Organifi offers you many more amazing certified organic products as well, ranging from excellent protein powders to skin support to liver detoxification to inflammation control and joint support to critical immune, which is designed specifically to enhance immune function. Why wait to be healthy when you can start now and create your own vitality account within your own body? After all, your body is your temple, and the health of your body has a direct impact on your mood and mental performance day in and day out. My family, clients, and I love Organifi, and I know you will too. To get your Living 4D with Paul CHEK 20% discount on any of the amazing Organifi products, go to organifi.com and on checkout use the code capital C, capital H, capital E, capital K 20. That's CHEK 20 in caps, and you and your family will be happier and healthier than ever. Enjoy.
You know, one of the most powerful things I ever learned is when I studied nonviolent communication is just to identify what the other person's true wants, feelings, or needs are. And a lot of people don't know how to directly express that. A lot of people don't even know what's winding them up. They're just reactive to something because it's so unconscious. But I've always found that if I can center myself and just say, what is it that you're really needing right now? And give a person the space to, some of them will say things like, I just want to beat you up. Like, well, yeah, but you've probably been wanting to do that forever, and here you are still addicted to it. So what is it that you really want or need? Mm-hmm. Do you need to feel safe? Do you need to prove to everybody that you're here, or what is it that you're needing? Because if we can find that out, maybe both of us can walk away from this without having to hurt, and in giving empathy. So I'm guessing you're feeling frustrated right now about something, or I'm guessing you're really angry at me for some reason. Could you share what it is that you're upset about? And I find if you can just get a person like that to start focusing on what's really going on inside of them instead of projecting, it can really have a very almost striking centering effect on people. It's almost like they got hit by a consciousness bomb.
It's a pattern interrupter.
Yeah, it is.
What is going on
What's
here?
What's this guy?
Yeah.
Why does he not want to punch me?
Right.
But I'm just for you guys listening, I'm long past all the ass kicking. So the old man in me is looking back on the youthful days of craziness, for which there was plenty. But yeah, it's a real journey. But it's great to see that you've let it guide you into your inner self, because that's, I think, at the end of the day, anybody that grows up comes to the realization that there's only one real enemy that is the scariest enemy, and that is the thing inside of us called ourselves, and the parts of us that even ourselves don't know, called shadow, and the ego. The ego is it's a pretty dangerous character at times, and it's our own, right? So it's like we're kind of in a perpetual state of shadow boxing with our own egos. And
I like that, shadow boxing.
Yeah, it's what it is. You can never outdo the guy in the mirror, can you? Right?
Just gotta love them.
Yeah, they're just as fast as you. They're just as smart as you, and they know every move you know. And until you actually spend time with that person in the mirror, you're never going to win.
That's the utility of the meditation practice. It's just sitting with yourself, getting to know yourself, actually getting a look at yourself from the bird's eye, having a look at things, the thought patterns, the feelings, just creating space for it all, deepening your relationship with yourself, and then cultivate a self that's beautiful.
A lot of violence I've seen too comes from the victim archetype. A lot of people feel victimized, and they may very well have been. I mean, I know for sure I was victimized. My stepfather made a victim out of all of us. But if you don't heal the victim archetype, then you're constantly trying to punish other people for what you think was done to you.
Right.
And you see this a lot in criminal cases and public shootings. People, someone has to pay for this. And you even see it in race riots like we recently had as the COVID thing was going on. And it just, I just like, are you guys paying attention? You're upset because you think white people are abusing you. So have you noticed that you've just looted and burned down the homes and businesses of about 100 colored people, which are your own people? And then this goes both ways. I'm not playing either side. White people do the same damn things.
Sure.
And every color does. But it's just an act of unconscious vengeance. Somebody's got to pay for this, but you don't realize it's actually your own people. A good example of that is I was in London working and teaching years ago, and I just happened to be in downtown London in an area called Chelsea, if I remember right, where one of the top football teams is.
Yeah, I've heard
soccer
that.
And this big stadium there. And I was at a ritzy hoity-toity club there where I was doing a lot of work with super duper movie star types. And I was on my way home in a taxi to my hotel, and the local team, Chelsea, got beat. And people were so irate that they were running through the street, flipping cars, smashing windows, lighting buildings on fire. I was like, what in the hell is going on? And the taxi driver said, our team just lost a soccer match. I said, your team just lost a soccer match?
That's
and
insane.
These people are the ones that live here and support your team, and they're lighting the city on fire and destroying cars? I'm like, that is a very low level of consciousness. And so the point is, you see, there's a victim mentality. Not we just lost fair and square and got our asses quick kicked. Let's go get back to the drawing board and actually get better. We're going to make somebody pay. And oh, by the way, we're not going to pay attention to the fact that who's paying is our own people, our own town.
Right.
So the point is that if we're not careful, the victim archetype can really do damage to the people we love the most, because we'll even strike them. And so it's just like the human condition. It's the unveiling of consciousness does not happen quickly. Unfortunately, Osho says it takes 6 billion people on the planet to produce one enlightened person. And whether it's true or not, I don't know, but it makes the point that waking up is not something that happens very easily. It'll happen passively over, maybe 150 lifetimes. But when you decide to get involved in it and start watching the story go on, which is why I love Carolyn Meiss's survival archetypes, the victim, the saboteur, the prostitute, and the eternal child, because we all have each of those in us. Until we heal them, we're acting them out unconsciously. And if we don't invest the time in some kind of a practice that brings us into witness position, I call it standing on the lifeguard tower. You got to get up on the lifeguard tower and witness the events of your life, and witness your reactions to people, and witness your judgments to people. But you can't get caught in the thoughts, feelings, or emotions, or it's like a lifeguard getting distracted, staring at some hot girl kissing another girl on the beach while some 13-year-old's drowning in a riptide because he's distracted. So, and that's the real practice of meditation, is learning to rise above your thoughts and witness them. In alchemy, that's called sublimation, rising above, which comes from the concepts of refinement, such as refining gasoline. You see the great big tall towers. So as the fuel gets more and more refined, it's pushed higher and higher up, and then it comes out the top. So sublimation and rising up means getting up above ourselves so we can see the show that we're caught in.
Right. And that's no easy task.
It is not. No.
It's no easy task. And that's why I feel my calling is to bring this kind of work, contemplative practice, the inner work of healing through meditation, to populations of men specifically that would otherwise turn their nose up at spiritual practice because it's hippy dippy trippy, it's airy fairy. That's not me. Come on. But I want to frame this as the real warrior's work.
Yes.
This is the hardcore shit.
It is.
You think you're hardcore? You think you're tough? All right, sit still for 30 minutes.
Let alone 10 days.
Let alone 4 weeks or whatever.
Yeah.
30 minutes. That's going to call something out of you. That's an edge. But the degree to which you're able to touch that edge is the degree to which you're going to heal yourself. And that's what's required.
My father had a completely different approach. It's a different type of meditation. You think you're tough? Here, take this axe. Split firewood nonstop for 8 hours. And if you don't, we'll see how tough you are another way. So my meditations were very long, drawn-out periods of shoveling horse shit and cow shit and digging fence post holes and picking rocks out of the field and bucking up firewood and splitting firewood and just like manual labor from dawn till dusk.
Yeah, that can be a meditation.
And if you didn't do a good enough job, his simple answer was, you don't get to eat.
That's a hard way to come up, man.
The next 4 hours were tougher because then you had to make sure you earned your dinner.
Wow.
Or you'd be doing it at night too. So Michael, can you give us a overview of your pathway to spiritual development and some of the teachers you've studied with and what they've taught you? Because I know of Shinzen, but I also know you've been to other people, retreats, various things. So if you have a memory of
absolutely
some of these, I think it'd be fun for the audience to hear, who these people were and what was it that you carried away? What were some of the gems that you got out of it?
So I think I was around 21 or 22, and I'd had a fascination with meditation. I was reading books and trying to develop a practice on my own, and I got curious enough that I was wanting to find a teacher. This is when I was still living in Philadelphia. And I found a place called the Shambhala Center, and I went and checked it out, but it just wasn't for me.
Oh, yeah.
Something about the vibe was off, or I don't know. First of all, I was way outside my comfort zone, even setting foot inside a place like that.
Most of the Shambhala centers that I know of are quite Eastern in their orientation.
Yeah.
Almost kind of sometimes a bit of a hippie type energy.
That's the vibe that I got,
Yeah.
and that's really a turnoff for me. And so then a few years after that, I decided I needed to change of scenery. I moved to Los Angeles.
Right into hippie central.
Yeah. But I did actually find, just coincidentally, I was in a Barnes & Noble. I picked up a book, learned about this meditation collective that just so happened to be a block away from where I was living. So I wandered in. The vibe felt right. It wasn't hippie. It was more like, it looked like a punk rock concert, to be honest with you. Long story short, that organization is now defunct due to some sexual misconduct on behalf of the founding member, which I'm learning is par for the course in a lot of the spiritual communities.
Yeah.
But as luck would have it,
well, true. Yeah.
I did encounter a teacher who was in that organization at the time. And, I really learned to trust my internal barometer. Now I can trust it. Easy. I know when someone's walking the walk or talking the talk, and most are talking the talk. But I could feel that this individual, his name is George Haas, he was a very wise man, very gentle, very kind, but he would speak about meditation and deep states of meditation from a place of direct experience, not from a place that he read it in a book.
Yeah.
So I just knew right there, like, okay, this is my guy. So I paid attention to him, and when he had class, I would show up and I would listen and I would, try to cultivate my daily practice. I would fail and I would come back to it and I would practice the techniques that he was teaching me. And our relationship deepened over the years, and he was a Shinzen student.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So that's how I came to Shinzen. So he was teaching a lot of Shinzen techniques, and he would often mention Shinzen by name. So I started to say, who's this guy? And so then I sought Shinzen out and sat on some retreats with him. And there's another one. I mean, he's a mystic. He's walking the walk. He is the real deal. And so felt very fortunate to have encountered that individual and his community and collective. And over the years, I've sat on many retreats with him and deepened my practice. George also introduced me to another one of his teachers named Dan Brown.
Oh, Dan Brown's famous. But you're missing out something I want to hear from you.
Oh.
Give us some pearls that you learned from each of these people, something tangible.
Yeah, so with regard to George, George taught me the value of the heart practice, metta. In fact, his collective is called Metta Group, and metta is a word for
Above.
Pali word. No, it actually means METTA,
Okay.
loving kindness.
Okay.
So it's the intentional cultivation of loving kindness for yourself, for others. And so he, at a time in my life where I was too tough for my own good, we talked about that cloak over insecurity. He was the gentle soul that helped me pull those things away, encounter my own pain, metabolize it, and cultivate a vibration of loving kindness for myself that then I could share with other people. So that was my main takeaway from George. And he also has, he's steeped also in the scientific. So he talks a lot about attachment theory, and he uses meditation to repair attachment disturbances and move, someone who's using a disorganized attachment style into the secure attachment. And then with Shinzen, it becomes much more mystical.
Before you go to Shinzen, give us something that anybody listening can practice from George.
So the metta practice is very simple. It's a traditional Buddhist practice. It's just the repetition of a phrase. The traditional phrase is, "May I be peaceful." Typically, it's offered in 5 directions for what they'll call the beloved or the benefactor. This is someone who just the thought of this person tends to evoke that vibration of loving kindness. For me, for years, my practice was my grandmother, who I told you about a moment ago, because I never felt anything from her but unconditional love. So the thought of her would just be like very soothing for me. And so you can cultivate that vibration using someone who was very kind to you, or even an archetype or a teacher, just to kind of get the ball rolling in that direction. The second traditional direction is metta for self. So you hold an image of yourself in mind and you just repeat, "May I be peaceful." It's like kind of rocking the baby to sleep. The third traditional direction is metta for the neutral person. Someone who's just a background player in your life. You don't really know them, but they just kind of exist. But through the practice, you start to realize that this is a whole person, just like me. And everyone that I encounter is a whole person just like me, with their own unique dreams and pains and aspirations. So you start to cultivate this mind state of loving kindness, which you look through and encounter other people, and your life becomes more peaceful. The fourth direction is the difficult person, the one who triggers you. And then you start to soften around them. And then finally you send that out in all directions for all beings.
Yeah, that's a good practical practice. This is one of the reasons they have so many gods in Buddhism, because they're symbolic of ways of relating, right? Ways of connecting. So connecting to the divine feminine or to the god of such and such, right? And in the house, I have a beautiful 2 huge books. I mean, there must be poster size of all the different gods of Buddhism, and I love looking at them, and it's really healing because just the energy in the art is so calming. But point being is they each represent an aspect of consciousness that the Buddhists found that if we cultivated it, has a healing effect on us.
Absolutely.
And a spiritual growth effect. So what you're describing is very along the lines of those practices.
And it's very simple. You just repeat a phrase, but it's the ways that it will change your mind are far-reaching. First of all, just to concentrate on a specific phrase, you have to prevent the mind from wandering, and you'll be continually confronted with, in trying to maintain the concentration, that the mind wanders. But over the course of time, you develop concentration skills so that you can direct your mind to a given task, and that will serve you in any aspect of your life. Also, you're quicker to notice when the mind wanders and starts perseverating or going into some thought formation that doesn't make you feel good. And then, from the empowered witness perspective, you can prevent the mind from doing that. So you can train the mind like a puppy to be nice to live with.
And the thing too is whenever you're using thought forms like that are part of a large community, like Buddhism, for example, is a large community, you tap into the collective unconscious of everybody using that thought form. So you actually get the strength of all the people who have walked that path. And so when you look at a religion like Buddhism that's been around for a very long time, I don't know if you ever studied Ram Dass very much, but there's a story that Ram Dass tells about when he first went to his master in India, and the master had him chanting Om for like months on end. And all of a sudden he begin to hear Om being chanted constantly, even when he wasn't doing it, whether he was walking down the street or sleeping at night. He just heard Om, Om, just going repetitiously. So he went to his master and he said, Master, why is it that I'm constantly hearing Om inside of me, even when I'm not chanting? And he said, because you've entered the field of consciousness in which all the people that have ever chanted Om exist. And so it was a beautiful description of how the thought form connects you to the collective unconscious of all the people that are in that spiritual practice. So it's kind of like, you know how athletes tend to perform better in front of large crowds. That's why you're more likely to win a game in your home stadium than you are when you're away, because your people are energizing you. And so those types of practices in a group setting where you're working with people that are committed to spiritual development can have a really enriching factor due to the unconscious connection that we gain when we're working with practices that have been around for a long time.
You know, turmeric's really, really hot now. There's a lot of scientific research on it, but they're not all created the same. So I brought Autumn Smith on to tell you about Paleo Valley's turmeric complex so you know exactly what the benefits are and why you, like me, should get your turmeric complex from Paleo Valley. Autumn, tell us about your turmeric complex.
At Paleo Valley, we are big believers in food as medicine. And so turmeric, of course, it has beat drugs out. We know it's anti-inflammatory. We know it has brain benefits. We know it has joint benefits. But what most people don't know is that a lot of turmeric supplements only contain one isolated compound of turmeric called curcumin. And so what we did instead was create a complex. We added organic turmeric and then ginger and rosemary and clove, which were some of the most DNA protective spices studied. And we created a complex. We added organic coconut powder and pepper for absorption. And so we've created a really high quality, highly bioavailable turmeric complex that will hopefully help you to feel your best. And all you have to do to check it out is go to paleovalley.com. That's PALEOVALLEY.com. And you can use the code CHEK15, that's lowercase CHEK 15, to save 15%.
When I was in the Army, I fought on the Army boxing team, and I also represented the Army in triathlon at the same time. And I used to push myself so hard in training, especially the boxing training was hard, but the triathlon training was tougher in many ways because it went on for hours and hours and hours and hours at a time, and I was pushing very hard. And all of a sudden, I was, in a lot of pain and a lot of lactic acid and these long, 100-mile bike rides where I was pushing as hard as I could. And I was just thinking inside myself, how can I get through all this pain? And all of a sudden, this chant just came to me, and it was, God is great, God is good, help me to do what I should. And for me, being successful at athletics was a way to avoid the combat elements of the military. I didn't really enjoy it, especially when I learned what was really going on in the military as opposed to being a legitimate force of national defense and finding out that we were really just a sword for rich people to steal from people, and that really upset me. But I just chanted that, and it would put me into a trance state, and I could push myself a lot harder for a lot longer periods of time. And so I learned, at that time I think I was probably 22, but I really learned the power of a chant, and it just came to me out of an internal request, which now I know it was my soul giving it to me.
Right. The power of a concentrated mind. Your mind can make a difficult situation infinitely more difficult, or it can make it much more manageable. And it's within your power to control which of those two avenues your mind takes. It takes practice, but the training is available to anyone who's willing to sit.
Well, the nice thing too is I hated sitting, and this is a very active meditation. But what I found happened every time is that I would time the words of the chant to the steps I was taking. So my whole body would become entrained, just like you can go into ecstatic dance, except I would find myself in sort of this interesting place of being nowhere In other words, I wasn't even aware that I was running or that I was cycling or that I was swimming my ass off. Once I engaged the chant, within usually 15 or 20 minutes, really pushing myself hard, the harder I'd push, the harder I'd have to really focus on the chant. But I would find that my breathing and my movements, whether it be the swim strokes or the pedal strokes or the strides and running, would all harmonize. And now I know that I was having peak states.
Sure, high concentration.
Yeah, and it would be amazing actually. And so I really came away with what I didn't realize so much was spiritual training. I had done chanting with the monks when I was young, now that I think about it. But I think it was I just had this inner desire to find a way to get rid of the pain, and I didn't think of it as something that I'd picked up from the monks more. It just sort of came to me, and it may have been the monks had planted the seed in me. I'm bringing that up because here's a simple practice for those of us that like to exercise,
Sure.
And whenever you're doing rhythmic exercise, it's very good for people that have a hard time meditating, because if you're doing a rhythmic exercise like running, swimming, riding a bike, rowing, the ego gets bored. But the ego has to stay just involved enough to keep you not from falling off the bicycle or the rowing machine or whatever. But it gets tranced. So what happens is you open that gateway to sort of an expanded experience of yourself, but your ego has to be in play just enough to keep you awake so you don't go unconscious, like a lot of people fall asleep meditating. But you can't do that when you're on a bicycle, or you'll, have a bad accident. So for those of you listening, if you want to introduce yourself to meditation, then all you got to do is really just start harmonizing your breath and come up with a chant, or find one that you really love, like Om Mani Padme Om.
May I be peaceful.
Yeah, or may I be peaceful, or God is great, God is good, help me to do what I should. And
there's nothing magical about the words "May I be peaceful." It's the concentration. In fact, my teacher George would often say, "You could say watermelon over and over. Watermelon, watermelon, watermelon." It's like you're giving your mind a chew toy.
Yes, it's like throwing a dog a ball. But the thing too, though, that I would say, having worked with this a lot, the more meaningful the words are to you, the better it'll work. Because watermelon is it'll work, yes. Like the dog doesn't give a shit what kind of stick you throw. But because, for example, I saw that my athletic career was really inspiring a lot of soldiers to really up their game. And even generals would come ask me for advice on training and ask me to write programs, and it used to freak people out. Why is the general talking to you? Well, I actually used to write his training programs, and he was a really highly competitive distance runner and triathlete. General Lofke, he was probably 68 years old, but he was a stud. And so when you have words that connect you to meaning and purpose, when you say, okay, what is my life all about? And how, there's a beautiful saying, the best teacher is the silent teacher, and the best lover is the silent lover. And I tell my students in the CHEK Institute all the time, remember, everyone's watching you. So you're teaching all the time. People are watching what you're buying in the supermarket. They're looking at your body. They're looking at your eyes. They're picking up the sound of your voice. They're paying attention to you constantly, whether you realize it or not. And the more harmonious you are and the more whole you are, the more they gravitate to you, because you have a central axis, meaning there's a level of stability in you that they can feel, like a dog can smell a skunk. And so if you can connect yourself to the concept that if I'm living and loving fully and growing myself honestly, knowing that that is the example, then the words that you choose, it could be something, I am happy, I am healthy, I am whole. I take my love wherever I go, which is a chant that I made up for students in HLC training. I am happy, I am healthy, I am whole. I take my love wherever I go. Oh, yes, I'm happy and I'm healthy and I'm whole. And you start rowing to that. And the next thing you know, guess what? you're happy, you're healthy, you're whole.
Yeah,
You're
and
taking
another-
your love wherever you go.
Another interesting thing happens too is that when you're not engaged in the formal practice, the mind will spontaneously say that to you
Yes,
because you've repeated it so many
yeah,
times. So it
it
just
be-
becomes like a
a
reminder.
reverberating
Yeah,
circuit is
right.
a technical name for that. It's a reverberating
Interesting.
circuit. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can get reverberating circuits with pain as well.
Yeah, and you can get reverberating circuits with negative self-talk.
Yeah.
Right. So you can train your mind to stop doing that.
Yeah. And you know the coin drill that I teach you, all those negatives are catalysts to freedom, right? Every one of the negative thoughts and judgments that we have is the key to the door to freedom. And all you got to do is say, well, if that exists, then what must also exist? I don't love myself can only exist because I do love myself is also a potential.
Mm-hmm.
Just like you can't have north without south.
Mm-hmm.
So once a person realizes that every one of the negative thoughts, feelings, and emotions and judgments is actually a doorway, there's the catalyst. And if you just consciously say, okay, I keep saying this to myself, I keep doing it, it's not getting me anywhere.
What's the opposite?
So now I have to roll it over. And if that negative exists, then I can choose to engage the positive. And even if you can't honestly look yourself in the eyes in the mirror and say, I love you, or I love myself, you can say, I have the potential to love myself, and I'm working on loving myself better every day, because we all have the potential.
Mm-hmm.
And so these are the kind of techniques that I studied and picked up and practiced and just came to me through my own intuitive investigation.
Sure.
How do I do it?
In the Shinzen curriculum, he would say that's what we call a nurture positive technique, which is exactly what metta is. Interesting story about the metta practice. I went to Myanmar with George, actually, years ago, maybe 3 years ago. And we went to a monastery there for 2 weeks just for metta practice.
Where is that?
Myanmar is formerly known as Burma.
Oh, Burma.
Yeah,
Wow.
so Southeast Asia. And we just stayed in the metta practice, all day long for 2 weeks on a silent retreat, just cultivating that mind state of loving kindness. And you can enter what is called the metta jhanas. This is just the traditional term for it, but it's high concentration and with heart opening. It's very blissful. But I come back from Myanmar and I'm on Venice Beach where I live. And I don't know if you've been to Venice, but it's a pretty chaotic spot.
Yeah, there's a lot of...
And so I'm walking.
Never get bored looking at what's going on there.
It's the best people watching in the world, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
You can often find me just chilling on a bench, watching the people. But anyway, I'm on the boardwalk and I'm doing walking meditation. I've just been doing it for 2 weeks straight, so it just kind of has a momentum of its own.
Mm-hmm. Starts carrying you.
Yeah. And this straight up Latino gangbanger rolls up to me. And he goes, yo, man, you're beautiful. I didn't know what he was going to say. He just came up to me and said, yo, man. And I said, yes, you're beautiful. I was like, oh, man, you're beautiful too. But they call that the metta facelift. Yeah, so you start to relax.
There's the silent lover and the silent teacher.
Yeah.
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 So Shinzen, I love Shinzen's book and audio program, The Science of Enlightenment, because unlike a lot of sort of spiritual fluffy talk, he really grounds it in some good scientific principles, which my left brain needs. I'm not addicted to science, but things need to have some level of rationality, and I need to see how you connect the dots before I, like when I did the fire walk with Tony Robbins, I saw him do it. Mm-hmm. And my first reaction is, well, if Tony can do it, I can do it, because he's only 2 weeks older than me. I'm his therapist. He's my friend, and there's nothing unique about Tony that I can't do. So my point is I saw that somebody could do it, and he explained it rationally, and he taught us a mantra to use so we didn't get burnt. And I said, well, if it works for Tony, it'll work for me. And sure enough, I just put myself into the state and just really invested myself in the mantra and walked right across the coals, and it just felt warm, actually. It didn't feel hot at all, but it was 2,600 degrees. And everybody that couldn't focus on the chant got burnt. And
really?
I think there was like 6 ambulances, and you could smell burning flesh everywhere, man. It's for real. And it's not 2 steps. It's probably from here to the garage door long, so about 30 feet. And it was oak, and they started it in the morning, and it was going all day during our training and seminars. And he had a big thermometer in there. He showed us it was 2,600 degrees. And I grew up around a lot of fires and clearing land, so I know how hot things like that get. And when you were standing next to it, just being close to it was enough to you felt like it was melting the hair on your legs.
Fascinating, the power of the mind.
Yes. So, sorry for the interjection, but I'm just saying I love Shinzen because he feeds the part of my mind that needs a rational explanation for something that may be very irrational. There's a lot of spiritual
Unrational.
Yeah, unrational, exactly. And some things look irrational. But once I listened to Shinzen, I was impressed because I have spent so much time studying the scientific aspects of it. He would meet that part of me as well.
Right.
So tell us a little bit more about your training with him and give us a nugget from Shinzen.
Yeah, so I just wanted to say that being a Shinzen student for years and a CHEK student for years, I always really wanted you guys to talk because you always reminded me of each other.
Yeah,
so scientifically minded and intelligent, but also quite mystical. And you guys are in a class of your own.
Thanks.
Yeah. So I would say Shinzen, he likes to say he takes the mist out of mysticism.
That's cool. I like that.
Yeah, so he can talk about these really esoteric, mystical concepts, but in a way that's actually makes total sense because he's such a brilliant scientific mind. I've heard a lot of people try to unify science and spirituality, and they don't really know what they're talking about. But with him, it's just like, wow, this is a bright mind. This is a very intelligent man. And like you said with Tony Robbins, if this works for him, I'm going to give this a try.
And Shinzen actually is a professor of mathematics and physics or something.
Yeah, I believe he's at the University of Arizona. He has a lab. And now he's studying technology to bring about enlightened mind states. And that's because his kind of whole view is that science can birth a new spirituality. There can be a commingling between ancient wisdom and modern technology that can save us.
And Dave Asprey is very into that. He's got this 40 days of Zen now, and he's couples it with a lot of various biofeedback technology because I've done 2 podcasts on his show and one on mine. And I actually, a friend of mine who is one co-founder of Bioptimizers, Wade Lightheart, who I've done a couple of podcasts with, and he's a quite evolved spiritual being himself. He did the 40 Days of Zen program, and he said it was very good, which really impressed me because, I'm suspicious of the whole biohacking thing for many reasons that I've talked about. So when the master and founder of biohacking is starting a Zen program, I get a little suspicious. So when Wade told me it was really good, I was very impressed. So good on you, Dave Asprey. I'm just making the point that his drive is to use science to induce, flow states, enlightening states, or higher consciousness. So I think that's the effective use of biohacking, actually, which I told Dave it shouldn't be called biohacking. It should be called bioharmonizing because hacking is such an invasive word.
Yeah, and it's like it implies a shortcut.
Yes, it implies shortcut, and that's usually what it's for.
Yeah, so with Shinzen, I just saw, he's much older too, and I also saw what's possible. This could be, as an old man, this is possible if you dedicate yourself to this practice as a young man. I mean, he bounces around, he's joyful, he's smart as a whip, he's kind to everyone. It's like he's been practicing these things for a long time. So it's like something to move toward. A wise elder.
Yes, I remember him telling a story about his, he was getting into an argument or something with one of his masters, and the guy got pissed off at him. And then he was quite shook up by it, but then all of a sudden he had this wave of calm come over him, and he realized that the master had more going on than just it looked like with his anger. And he approached the master about this experience, and his master smiled at him and said, as long as I can get angry, I'm still healthy, because the guy was like really old, close to 100 or something like that, if I remember the story right. But so the guy was saying, anger is an important emotion, and it revitalizes you and gets you in touch with yourself. So he says, if I stop getting angry, I'm close to dying. But his anger wasn't the kind of anger most of us think about it. I think he was just probably putting on a show for Shinzen to trick him into making him have to think about what was really happening.
A little coyote wisdom.
A little coyote wisdom, yeah, a little Loki.
Hi, everybody. I'm super excited to announce an amazing offer from Bioptimizers for those of you that have never tried Masszymes, which are my favorite enzymes. I use them every day. I use them to help me digest food, and I also use them to help clean up my body to increase athletic performance and recovery. But I wanted to share Wade Lightheart with you because he's here with me today, and he can tell you some of the most important things that Masszymes can help you with.
Yeah, Masszymes is great for bloating, gas, indigestion, brain fog. If you're waking up with, that kind of foggy feeling, crust in your eyes, bad breath, it's oftentimes because of undigested protein.
Right.
Masszymes is the strongest proteolytic enzyme blend on the market today. It uses cultured enzymes, which are 10 to 100 times more potent than a regular enzyme. It also includes 14 other enzymes involved, as well as astragalus root. And what it does is it will essentially take 1 gram of protein and create the equivalent of 3 grams of amino acids, which is what your body actually needs. Normally, our digestive powers wane significantly by the time that we're 30 or 40 years old, and that's why a lot of athletes have a hard time recovering.
Yes.
Masszymes boosts recovery, transforms your digestion, and improves your clarity and focus, as well as a little energy boost.
That's amazing. So you have a really amazing offer for people. Can you share that offer? Because this is a rare offer, so wait till you hear this one.
Well, if you've never tried Masszymes before, we're going to make this super easy. In fact, we're going to give all of your listeners a free bottle of Masszymes. Just go to www.masszymes.com/PaulFree. That's MassZymes.com/PaulFree, and you will get a free bottle. And of course, if you have tried Masszymes, of course, you can go to www.bioptimizers.com/living4d. Paul10 is the discount code. That's small Paul10.
And you'll get 10% off all Bioptimizers products, and it's BIOPTIMIZERS.com. So thanks, Wade. That's an amazing offer. You guys take advantage of this offer because these are definitely the best enzymes I've ever tried in my life, and I've tried a lot of them. So once you try them and you feel how beneficial they are, I guarantee you're going to see that Masszymes are not a cost. They're an investment in your health and vitality. Wade, thanks for sharing today. Love having you here. Always best to get the wisdom right from the master himself.
Thanks so much, Paul.
Oh, great spirit. So, did you forgive me? You didn't give us a Shinzen technique yet, did you?
Well, that would maybe take more time than we have, but Shinzen's, I think, most widely known for his technique called See, Hear, Feel, which is just kind of a simplified Vipassana. And so whereas the heart practices like metta or cultivating positive mind states are on the heart side of the path, which is indispensable and very important part of the path, Shinzen, in addition to those kind of practices, offers the wisdom path, like really concentrating the mind enough that you can pull apart the self-experience into its component threads, which he calls see, hear, and feel. So if we start to pay attention, we notice that the sensing experience of the moment is this constant intermingling between internal mental talk and external sound, internal visual space and the external visual field, and physical sensation and internal emotional sensation. Those things are always kind of coagulating into self. And if you can get still enough and concentrated enough to start to pull those threads apart, now you start to find yourself in more of a flow, and the mind becomes more and more concentrated to the point where the self-experience starts to dissolve. And you can taste maybe these moments of a unitive experience. And that's starts to call into question barriers between self and world. You become you're more empowered to recognize afflictive mind states and not act from them. More space emerges around you. You become less reactive, more intentional with your actions in the world, and it's actually can be quite psychedelic. The deeper I go into my practice, the more I start to see these monastics and yogis and deep lifelong practitioners, like they're really tripping. They're really tripping on a highly concentrated mind and tasting reality as it is. And that's the most potent psychedelic that there is.
I was what you triggered me. One of my favorite alchemy books that I've studied is by a guy named Stephen Rosen, and alchemists are quite deep too, and very beautiful path. And Jung was a real alchemist, and he in his book gives some neat meditations, which I happened to be studying his book when we were on vacation in Alaska a couple of years ago. We took a cruise. It was actually on my birthday that year. We flew to Vancouver, British Columbia, and then took a cruise all the way up to Alaska and way up, into the glaciers and all that. And where we were staying was in Seward, one of those, something like that, Alaska, a little tiny town out in the middle of the Great White North. And we rented this house. It was a log cabin, but it would, hold a lot of people. It was really big. It was underneath somebody's house. It was a great big place. And we had the bottom half and it had a beautiful fireplace. And they had one of the best saunas I've ever been in my life. And I was having these beautiful meditations in there. And I was reading this book by Stephen Rosen, and he gives these meditations, and one of them is along this lines, which is why you triggered me to share it. He says, meditate not on what you're seeing, but on who it is that's seeing what you're seeing. Meditate not on what you're hearing, but who it is that's hearing what you're hearing. Meditate not on what you're feeling, but who it is that's feeling what you're feeling. And so I would go into meditation and say, okay, I'm looking at the sauna right now, but who's actually seeing this? And I had some deep and very interesting experiences doing those meditations in the sauna, and it really brings you into a very big question. Okay, who is it that's actually listening to what my eardrum is hearing?
Right. What am I?
Yeah.
What is this? What is happening here?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's the confrontation with those big questions. And then, not to suggest that you check out of life or become nihilistic, but when you're confronted with those bigger questions, existential questions, the fact that you don't even know what you are, playfulness starts to emerge in life. The things that used to make you crazy aren't such a big deal anymore because you're grappling with bigger fish. So you become more peaceful. Yeah. To your point about that, who sees, who hears, there's a line that I like. I forget where I heard it, but when you throw a stick, what does a dog do?
Chase it.
Chases it. If you throw a stick, what does a lion do?
He probably eats you.
He's going to look at the stick, and then he's going to look back at you. So the lion is more concerned with the source. Where is this coming from? The puppy will run around, and we can spend our whole lives in puppy mode. Just chase.
Yes.
Next thing.
Totally.
Or we can find lion mind and start to say, I'm just going to sit still and try to figure out where this is coming from.
Yeah. I could go into a big segue on alchemy right there because the lion is a real feature in alchemy, but I'll not sidetrack us. So you got George, you got Shinzen. Are there others?
Yeah, Shinzen in his Dharma talks on retreat would often, he was a Zen Buddhist monk, but he doesn't really teach Buddhist practice anymore. He's like a mystic. So he's studied a lot of contemplative practices, and what he does is kind of finds the common threads, and he's developed what he calls unified mindfulness, which is more of a secular approach to contemplative practice. But in his talks, he would often talk about practices from all different kind of spiritual paths.
He does know them all.
He does, man. And he would talk, and remember, we're talking about a very intelligent scientific mind. So when someone like that starts talking about things like shamanism, I start listening. He starts talking about the Red Road, the Native American spiritual path. I start listening. So he put me on to the Sweat Lodge, and
I love Sweat Lodge.
Yeah, so I'll go to the Sweat Lodge. They haven't been doing them with the quarantine thing going on, unfortunately. But
I have.
Yeah.
Write my own.
Yeah. So there's this amazing guy up in Oxnard who runs an authentic Lakota sweat, and I've been there, and it's prayer. It's prayer. And Shinzen also talks about shamanism, and I've heard you talk about shamanism so much, I really get curious now. I live in Venice Beach, California. You can't throw a rock without it landing on a air quote shaman. Everybody thinks there's a shaman, so I was very selective about where can I learn about this in a way that's authentic. And I consulted with a woman that I know who's very evolved, and she recommended a course of study in the UK. So I've been enrolled in a program there for the past year and a half, and I'm learning that path, but I'm connecting the dots. It's all the same thing, just different, slightly different words, different practices, but it's all about knowing yourself at the deepest level. And that's, shamanism is where it all birthed from. I don't
Yeah.
need to tell you that. You know
No.
better than anybody.
Yeah, it's there's the map right there.
Yeah,
It
exactly.
shows you all these paths and how they all merge together. And it's, as I said to you, most people in today's world religions have no idea what they're actually made of. And many of them criticize and reject shamanism and various forms of paganism, but don't realize that their whole religion was built on that stuff.
Exactly.
I'm like, are you kidding me?
Exactly.
Somebody needs to educate you.
Yeah. So go back to the source.
Yeah.
Find where it all started. So that's been a very interesting course of study. It doesn't involve any substances, just altering the state of consciousness through, the drumming, the rattling, different rituals to connect with nature. And I've gone into the course of study with an open mind, but not necessarily a little skeptical. Like I haven't drank the Kool-Aid, but I've had some experiences that, the more I often say. I say it more and more. The deeper my path gets, the more I learn, the less I know.
Yeah, it's good. So great, Michael. I loved hearing about Shinzen. I think he's a very interesting man. As you know, I did do a podcast with him. So if any of you are interested in listening to Shinzen, I would highly recommend his course, The Science of Enlightenment, which I believe is through soundstrue.com.
Yeah, it's not a course, it's an audio.
It's an audio
Yeah.
book. Yeah, to me it feels like a course because he takes you through so much.
Oh, man, you can listen to that.
I think I've listened to the whole thing 3 times. It's pretty comprehensive. It's quite a number of CDs as well. I got it on CD so I could listen to it in my car when I drive. But I've got his book as well. Whenever I find a good audio program, I buy the book. That way I can go look at diagrams and take notes or look up key things I need more time to digest than I can do while I'm driving or lifting in the gym.
Yeah, he also has the book that recently came out maybe 2 or 3 years ago, The Science of Enlightenment.
That's what I'm referring to, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
see.
So who's next on your list of
Well, I mentioned Dan Brown earlier.
Yes, Dan Brown. Yeah, let's hear about
Yeah.
Dan Brown because he's been around for a long time and he's somebody that Ken Wilber talks about. I've read various things he's written, and I know he's one of the leaders of attachment theory. And
he's also a lineage holder in what's called the Bon, which is a pre-Buddhist Tibetan shamanism. And I think he's on the board at Harvard Medical School.
he is, yeah.
So you're talking about a man who's pretty well versed in both worlds, the East and the West.
And just for the listeners, there's 2 podcasts with him on Dave Asprey's podcast. Unfortunately, the sound quality is very poor. And one thing about Dan Brown is he talks so damn fast. At least on that podcast, it's hard to follow him. He's moving at the speed of light, which surprised me for a guy that's that. Usually people slow down as they get deeper and deeper, but he is like he's in a hurry.
Yeah, and he's also got a thick Bostonian accent.
Yes, he does, yeah. But it's still worth listening to.
So I sat on a retreat with him, and the cool thing about that was when I was in class with you, we got into a dialogue, just you and I remember the moment you dropped in, bop, looked me dead in the eye, said, "This is a book you have to read." And you said, not only do you have to read it, you have to study it. And I'm like, okay. And it was Streams of Wisdom by Dustin DePerna. And
Good
Dustin DePerna was there on the retreat as an assistant instructor.
Is that cool?
So I brought the book and I got to meet him and we had a great chat and he signed the book. It was so cool. It all came, and that book was amazing.
It is amazing.
Yeah.
It really gives you a great education on not only what consciousness is, but how it grows and develops and a lot of the misconceptions of consciousness. And there's, if you saw my copy of it, it looks like I've gone to town on it with notes and colors, and there's not very many sentences that aren't highlighted or underlined because the whole book's like worth digesting every sentence of it. And one of the things I loved about Dustin DePerna is he actually, I hate to say it, but he teaches Ken Wilber better than Ken Wilber in many areas. Because Ken Wilber's kind of like so intellectually endowed that he kind of like reading Carl Jung. It can take a while to digest it all, or Steiner. And what I found with Dustin DePerna is he can actually take some of Ken Wilber's concepts and break them down so that people can digest them and understand them better than if they were with Ken Wilber.
Yeah, it's kind of like the best athletes are not often the best coaches,
Right.
because it just comes so naturally to them. They can't really
They don't know how to
explain
express
it.
what they do innately.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So what some of the gems from Dan Brown?
Just his vibe, man. I just remember him being ferocious, but ferocious compassion, and I'm not sure that I'd ever seen that embodied before.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a man who's a deep practitioner and committed to teaching and to the Dharma, but he's like a hardcore, like kind of a grumpy Bostonian, and so it was super cool to see a man of such wisdom and have that personality, and they don't conflict with one another.
You know, that brings up an important point I'd like to elaborate on. A lot of people have this very false notion that people that are enlightened are mushy-gushy,
Right.
lovey-dovey,
Right.
pushovers, you know, so people kind of think of, you know, a lot of people get that experience from Thich Nhat Hanh, for example,
Sure.
or even the Dalai Lama, who most people don't ever see really express much, you know, intensity. But because I've studied enough of his material and listened to enough interviews, and I listened to watched a documentary that featured his personal assistant who said, "Oh yes, he can."
Got some fire in the
You know,
belly.
there's a dragon in there. All you got to
Yeah.
do is push the right button. Like try to waste his time with a bunch of silly arguments, and he'll just get up and walk out of the room and leave you sitting there, even though you flew all the way to Tibet or wherever he's at right now to see him. India, I think he's at. But the point I'm driving at is that the deeper you go into authentic spiritual development, the more your true personality emerges.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, having studied a lot of enlightened people, I mean, all you got to do is remember what Jesus did to the money changers. He flipped their tables over and told them to get the hell out. Right?
I love that story.
So I think a lot of people meet someone like Dan Brown and or people like, you know, Osho, for example, had quite a distinct personality and wasn't afraid to stir the shit up and face the dragon and even poke the dragon a lot, as we all know. If you haven't seen what is the show called, the series Wild Wild West?
Wild West. Yeah, I
Wild
think it's
Wild
called.
West. It's very good. It really shows, you know, the light and the dark of Osho. But here's a guy who was really quite evolved in many, many ways, but was not a softy pushover.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he wasn't afraid of a good battle.
He was authentic.
And so I just brought that up because it's a real kind of a childish notion that enlightened people are mushy and gooey.
Namaste.
Yeah, namaste,
Yeah.
namaste. Walk all over me, I won't care. But it's just so far from the truth. And I think Dustin DePerna's book is very good. In fact, in Dustin DePerna's book, he brought up a pretty powerful point. Most of the so-called enlightened masters were still really at the level of third chakra development, which is really I-ness, right? They're still really developing their power and finding their power, but they're still highly revered masters. It's just that they're much more evolved than most people. So to the average person, they look very evolved. But when you put the lens of a skilled analysis on them by someone like Dustin DePerna or Dan Brown, they showed quite clearly that most of them are still centered in their third chakra, which was interesting for me to learn. It surprised me, really.
Yeah. So it was a few years back. I went up to Northern California to sit on a retreat with Dan Brown, and it was really cool and really different from any meditation retreat that I'd ever done, because basically par for the course on a meditation retreat is, all right, night one, bell rings, stop talking, and we're not going to talk again until 2 weeks from now. But with Dan Brown, the meditation periods are very short, 20 minutes, and they're guided. And the thinking there, I believe, is you want to bring the totality of your concentration power to this 20 minutes. It's like a sprint. So you can go all out. And then the bell rings, and it's as if you're just at a seminar. Mm-hmm. You're instructed to talk with people and have lunch and do those things. And then when it's time to practice, you practice. And then when it's not time to practice, you just stop meditating. And I'm the kind of individual who really likes the silence of a meditation retreat. Mm-hmm. So I was thinking, I'm not going to like this. I'm not going to be able to really dig in deep. And I was shocked at how deep the practice got. So it was not what I was used to, but it was amazing. And it's more of just an open awareness practice. Actually, with him, the instruction is to keep your eyes open and not really do anything. Just allow for awareness to start becoming aware of itself. It was beautiful. Highly recommended.
Hi, everybody. I'm super excited to tell you about Symbiotica's Synergy D3K2 CoQ10 product, which is really, really amazing. Tastes fantastic. Totally top of the notch source materials, best you can find anywhere, and totally synergistic. This is not an isolate product. And I am going to ask Sherveen, the formulator of the product, to tell you exactly what this product will help you with. Sherveen, how does D3K2 CoQ10 enhance my life?
Well, it's like sunshine in a bottle.
Oh, I like that.
A Myron glass bottle, if you will.
Well,
so
that keeps the sunshine healthy.
correct. So the sunlight is bottled within this bottle, so no UVA and UVB lights can get in it. But let's talk a little bit about D3K2. The synergy between those two creates power, creates energy, and it activates your immune system. It
Beautiful.
keeps you strong. Those two work together in, the perfect synergy. That's why we call it synergy. At the same time, K2 is known for taking free-floating calcium out of your blood and out of your soft tissues, meaning your heart.
Yes.
And we know the leading cause of death in this world is heart disease.
Yes.
Which is, calcified heart, calcified tissue. Mm-hmm. And it puts it where it belongs, in your bones. So this product right here is taking free-floating calcium, and putting it into your bones. It's turning your D3 immune system up. And we have ubiquinol CoQ10 in there, which is the strongest heart antioxidant. There's so many directions we can go with this, but just know this. This best-tasting formula, that's what it's rated at, is basically immunity, it's love, it's heart, it's connection, it's strength, it's vitality. It's all wrapped in one. We really knocked this one out of the park.
Sounds like something that we should use on a daily basis as a sort of a general bulletproofing.
100%. This is a daily used product. I like using it on the rise because it mimics the sun's activation on our skin, which turns on D3 production in the body. There's a method to this madness. We're doing things the right way. It's not a one size fits all. It's really understanding how our bodies work. And this is amazing stuff.
Yes, I love the taste of it and I love the feel of it. So go to symbiotica.com, Cymbiotika, and on checkout, use the code CHEK15, all in caps, capital C, capital H, capital E, capital K, 15. While you're there, check out all their other amazing products and take advantage of your discount because your 15% is across the board. Enjoy. So any tips from Dan Brown that people can practice?
I wouldn't. He's a lineage holder, so what he teaches you can't teach, and I couldn't teach it even if I wanted to. Like I said, it's open awareness practice, so there's really not even a technique. You don't do anything. You just sit there, and somehow, through his guidance, through his practice,
His presence.
awareness starts
You're
to
in
shift.
his field, so he's shifting you with his field. But there is a tip there, focused practice, where you really put your concentration to work for the period of time that you're capable of concentrating, can be more powerful than sitting for 6 hours wishing you were somewhere else.
Right, and that's exactly what he'll say. You spend the bulk of a retreat thinking, so let's just 20 minutes. Can you give me 20 minutes? Now, we would do that maybe, 8, 9, 10 times a day, something like that.
That's great.
Yeah, but I had a much more deeper and profound experience than I thought would have been possible given that kind of structure for a retreat.
Any others?
Yeah, Wim Hof.
Yeah, good.
Yeah,
I saw you sent me some pictures. That was great.
Yeah, I studied with Wim Hof and took the instructor training, and he's just super cool guy, man. Like, God bless him. He's not really sharing anything brand new. Breath, but because he's such a big, charismatic, infectious personality.
And he's demonstrated his own, he's demonstrated clearly that whatever he's teaching works.
Right. And he'll also remind us often that there's nothing special about me. If you do this, you can do this. So I was with him in Poland earlier this year, and that was an incredible experience. Deep, transcendent, heart-opening experiences through the breath. And then exposing yourself to the cold, like I said earlier, like you were saying when you were in your triathlon training. it's amazing what you can endure if your mind isn't making it worse. So you just, to tie it together to the Shinzen kind of way, I've come to view cold as a concentration accelerant, as an equanimity accelerant. Because if you can just be with it and dissolve into it, it just becomes sensation.
Most people make themselves colder than the cold water is going to be by just imagining.
This is going to be so hard. Oh my God, I don't know. Can I do it?
Yeah.
You lose the breath. You stay with the breath. Deep breaths.
Yeah.
You just breathe through it, man. We were hiking. I was wearing my Speedo. We're getting in the icy rivers of Poland. And because life for the modern man is so comfortable, we never really have to challenge ourselves and wake up that, we are here because our ancestors were tough as shit. They were eking out a living against harsh nature. And that capacity is still in us. We just never have to call upon it. So if you put yourself in a position where you have to call upon it, oh man, this primal energy just kind of wakes up in you, and the eyes get a little brighter, and it's incredibly refreshing. I get in the cold tub every day, and it's no longer an act of discipline like, oh, I got to do it. It's just, I authentically love it.
Yeah, well, it's good for you. It invigorates you, clears your head. I'll tell you another thing it does is it can, a lot of people ask me, how do you enhance your sex drive? I say, just get in some cold water. Take the coldest shower you can till your skin goes numb before you jump in bed with your lover, but let them know you're coming, because it usually shocks the hell out of them when an ice cube climbs in.
Yeah.
But, people buying Viagra and all this other silly stuff, all you got to do is just use a cold bath or a cold shower.
Yeah, it's improved circulation.
Get 6 to 10 minutes. Not only that, it accumulates a huge amount of yin energy. So
right.
It's not just the circulation. It's the fact that yin draws energy into a center. So when you're in the cold, the energetic effect is you're pulling energy in, just like when you plug your phone into the charger. It has a profound charging effect. It's sleep is yin. So proper use of cold therapy is sort of like an accelerated sleep with regard to the energetic effects on your body. And it's quite amazing too. I have this very bad neck injury, and I've got a lot of instability in my neck. But in the winter, when the water gets colder here, or when I'm in places like Toronto, for example, where the water will just make your skin go numb fairly quickly, even in the summertime in a lot of the places there, if it's not going through pipes around heated areas. But my buddy Rory's, in his condo complex, there's a swimming pool and a steam and a sauna downstairs. And when you turn that cold water, I don't care what time of year it is, it'll freaking freeze your skin within about 60 seconds. You're going numb. But I'll sit and let that cold water on my neck, where my neck injury is, and the ligaments will begin to tighten after about 4 or 5 minutes, and I will literally hear like manipulation sounds, like the joint being pulled right back into place. Because the loose ligaments are tightening enough, it'll shift the actual vertebra, and I can feel the whole thing move, just like somebody was adjusting my neck.
Yeah, it's healing.
And when you have experiences like that, and you feel how much more stable your joints are after that, you get a visceral experience of what yin does to the tissues, which is why I used to tell physical therapists all the time that kept ultrasounding lax joints, what are you doing? You're making the damn thing looser and looser. And they'd look at me like I was from outer space or something. I said, don't you understand how fascia works? And don't you understand the mechanics of heat and what it does to connective tissues? You're moving that person in completely the wrong direction. I would take those same people and ice massage them or put them in an ice bath, and all of a sudden they were much more stable and had a lot less pain. I'm like, what the hell happened here? I'm like, oh, it's called using the right therapy. But anyhow, so yin is in, baby.
Yin is in.
Yeah. So Wim Hof, you learn to focus your breath and use your mind so that you don't create more problem for yourself than reality is presenting to you.
Exactly. Just be with difficulty, and then find that it's actually not that difficult, and that you can endure it, and that then translates to other areas of your life. Oh, I can be with discomfort. I can handle this.
We need it. If you don't have discomfort, you don't grow. I mean, what do? We go to the gym. If you don't train into the level of discomfort, you don't grow. You don't get stronger. If you don't work through discomfort in relationships, you don't grow. you just give up. Conflict is part of healthy relationship. And most of the conflict is our own conflict, whether it be getting cold or exercising. I mean, like you alluded to, our culture has become so sedentary, and we're so mechanized, and in the internal environments of our living and working spaces are so controlled that our body doesn't go through the natural fluctuations that we're designed by nature to go through. And people forget we are nature. We're supposed to get colder when it gets colder outside. We're supposed to get hotter when it's hotter outside. So if we're constantly living at 72 degrees, then our autonomic nervous system gets weak, and people forget that the arteriovascular tree is a muscular tree. The arteries are full of muscles, and if you don't expose yourself to cold and heat, then the arteriovascular tree does not have to regulate the flow from the surface to cool you or warm you to the core and back. So when you get into, say, a cold shower, your arteriovascular tree opens and sends all the blood to the surface. But as you start going numb, you get what's called a Hunter's reflex, and the arteriovascular tree constricts peripherally and pushes the blood into your internal organs, which is called a Hunter's reflex, which comes from when hunters would fall through the ice duck hunting. The water was so cold that in order to keep them alive as long as possible, the body shunts all the blood it can into the internal organs and the brain to keep you alive, because it doesn't matter if you lose a few fingers or toes or even a hand, you'll still live. But if you lose your brain or your liver or your kidneys, you're dead. So once we experience numbness coming on, we're actually activating the Hunter's reflex. So you're going from complete opening of the arteriovascular tree to constriction of the arteriovascular tree, which is expansion and contraction, which is exactly what you do with muscles in the gym. You expand them and contract them. And this is why so many people today have problems with varicose veins and pooling of fluids in their legs, especially elderly people, because the valves in the veins are worn out and the arteriovascular system is just weak. So gravity overpowers the fluids in the body and pushes it down into our lower extremities and causes a lot of stagnation.
So get in the cold tub.
Just get in the cold tub or just use the coldest shower you can get and make yourself happily uncomfortable. And you can alternate back and forth too. You can do a minute of cold, minute of hot, minute of cold, and finish with cold, and do that 6 to 10 times, and you'll walk out of there feeling better than coffee could ever make you. Or
that's so true, man.
Most drugs, right?
It's very invigorating, very euphoric, very enlivening. I remember when I first started cold exposure practice a long time ago, even just a cold shower was like, it's kind of a gut check every morning. I don't really want to do it, but I know I'm supposed to, so I'll do it. But that's just over now. I love it.
Yeah, I was telling people to do cold water therapies and cold showers probably 12 or 14 years before Wim Hof ever even started talking about it in the public. And people used to tell me I was crazy and write me letters saying, don't you know that's dangerous? It makes people sick. And I'm like, oh my God.
That's the problem. This notion that we are so weak that we can't handle a cold shower or a day without food, stuff like that.
It always makes me think of Carl Jung's quote, the average man can never be successful. Point being, if you're average, you're not successful, you're average. And if your health is average, then you're not healthy, you're average. And today, being average is a very dangerous proposition because the average person's very sick and very sedentary and very weak physically, emotionally, mentally as well, which is sad because that's a direct byproduct of so-called technologies that are supposed to help us. And we need to get back in touch with the earth and with our core being.
Yeah, be a bit of a weirdo.
Yes, yeah, in the actual sense of the word, weird is really a word that means similar to magic in its authentic origin, and not magic like sleight of hand, but somebody who's out of the box,
right?
Someone who's mysterious but effective.
Get out of the box.
A shaman would be considered weird, for example.
Absolutely,
a real shaman. Anybody else?
Yeah, Paul CZECH. I don't know if you heard of him.
I've got one of his books or two, and actually I've got 11 books by him in my library.
He's a bit of a loose cannon.
He's a bit
but
crazy.
He's a good dude if you get to know him. Yeah. That was years ago. I'm trying to remember what I was up to, Tai Chi or something, and a friend of mine was telling his friend about it. His friend is Greg Mealy. He got a gym in L.A., amazing gym. Anyway, he said, "Oh yeah, he's a CHEK guy." And my buddy said, "A what?" He said, "A CHEK guy." So what do you mean a CHEK guy? Paul CHEK. I don't know what you're talking about. And so then my buddy told me that. So you got to check this guy out, Paul CHEK. I said, okay. So I went on YouTube, watched a couple of videos. I was like, oh, okay. This guy's on to something else. Here's a guy who's physically fit, strong, but also talking about, the spiritual side of things. And I hadn't seen that before. I hadn't seen someone who is as physically healthy as they're wanting to be spiritually, mentally, emotionally. God bless Shinzen, but I mean, he's just a skinny old man. And I see you, and I'm like, okay, I want to be like this.
You are.
Yeah. Well, I have good role models. And so watched a bunch of videos, got super fascinated. At this time in my life, I'm working in the gyms as a fitness trainer. But it's like, I have this other exploration in my personal life for my personal development, much deeper things. And now I'm coming into the gym and, it's comfortable and it's not so challenging and I'm doing well, but there's a lot of small talk and it's just killing my soul. I'm not fulfilled by teaching how to do lat pull downs anymore.
You're tired of being a rent-a-friend?
Yeah. And so then I watched some videos of you and I signed up for HLC1 and the curriculum was just mind-blowing.
Great, yeah.
Yeah, it was like, it was a way to develop spiritually by caring for your physical body. And here I'm like, oh yeah, because I was living two lives. I had my martial art life and my fitness life and then my spiritual life. And what I found in the CHEK curriculum was actually the same thing. They are the same thing. Your physical health is a spiritual practice because this body is not yours.
You can't give what you don't have.
Yeah, this body was a gift, and so now you have to take care of it. And my mentality before the HLC trajectory was very disciplined, regimented, surface level. And then I started to see, okay, wow, my exercise should be an expression of love for myself. And so I just gobbled up the curriculum. HLC 1, 2, 3, I was in HLC 3 twice. But the thing is, and we talked about this a bit yesterday, of course the CHEK curriculum has influenced my approach with my clientele. But more than that, it's given me a path for myself.
Yeah,
and the more I live what I learn in your classrooms, the more people come to me for work. And you always said, if you can't make a living teaching health in a very, very, very sick society, what the fuck you doing?
Well, I would say there's some kind of internal blockage you need to deal with because there's, honestly, there are, as you said, there's so many sick people. The market is massive, right? It'd be like becoming a tire salesman the year that everybody figured out what a wheel was. Well, everybody's going to want one. So if you can't make money selling wheels right now, then you better go sit under a tall tree and figure out what your blockage to success or financial gain is or whatever. Because, look, I've got a 9th grade education and I've made a lot of money selling health. And I tell people the best form of marketing is telling the truth attractively, not bullshitting people. And the best way to tell the truth attractively is to eat, sleep, breathe, and shit what you're teaching so that there's no question that it works. Or there's always two people in front of you. Meaning, when you go see somebody like that, so somebody who's saying one thing and living another thing, now you're dealing with someone who's split. So they might be intellectually sounding really good, but the inner truth buzzer's not going off. So if you're saying all this about gluten and you're saying it produces these symptoms, why do you look like you have all the things you just told me that I have? But you're telling me not to do it, and clearly you're doing it. So it creates a blocking factor, and it creates insecurity in people at a very deep level because their truth buzzer's not going off. And that's why I say all you got to do is just be the change. And then it doesn't have to be a bunch of technical mumbo jumbo. You don't need to have some kind of rocket ship brain. All you got to do is teach people what you do every day, because that's as far as most people need to go, is just 6 foundation principles and 4 doctors. And I tell people all the time, look, people come to me from all over the world with every problem you can imagine that have failed in the medical system, failed with shaman and healers. And 90 to 95% of them, I don't ever have to do more than what's in my book, How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy. The real trick is getting the behavioral blockages out of the way. In other words, it's not the practice that's hard. It's the story they keep telling themselves about why they don't have time to do it or how much it's going to hurt or, the inner dialogue. And that's where the real work is. And that's why I have the more advanced training, such as CHEK 4-quadrant coaching, because then we get into some of these really deeper assessments of the psyche, because that's where a lot of the problems are. It's really not the practices themselves. They're all simple, really, like zone exercises. Anybody can do it.
Yeah, or eating whole food or getting to bed on time.
Yeah.
What I find in my work is that it's most people know how to take better care of themselves, but they're not doing it. And the work is, why aren't you doing it? And that's a very complicated question. What do you believe about yourself, your life, the world, God, whatever? Why aren't you taking care of yourself?
Yes, and that's why I put the love model that I did in the course work, and why I teach the coin drill, so people can really do authentic work with their own mind and get out of the unconscious into the conscious and start objectifying what is normally subjective. Until you bring something from the subjective into the objective. In other words, if you keep making excuses about why you're doing things and say, I don't know why I keep eating that or drinking that, I just keep doing it, well, you're still unconscious. But when you bring it up and say, okay, I just had a thought that my workout's not going to feel good today and I don't want to do it. What's your dream? Well, my dream is to look good and feel good. Good. Well, if my workout's going to make me feel bad and I don't want to do it as real, then you have to flip that over. And my workout won't feel bad, and I'm doing it because I'm choosing to do it because it creates freedom in my life. So which one of those do you want to put your energy into? And if you get aware that we always have choices, and an adult is someone who makes choices. A child is someone who expects somebody else to make things happen for them. So what I try to do with people is in training is show them, look, your mind is accessing all possibilities, but you're in the habit of choosing the ones that have gotten you the results that got you in pain, got you in trouble, and took your health away. So now that you're aware of what the results of those choices are, because you're wearing in it, you're walking in it, you're eating, you're living in it, you can see it in the mirror every day, you know that path leads to what you've got. So if you want to learn to use your mind, make different choices so you can get different things. But most people aren't going to do that just because that's logical, and that's why the dream is so important. What is your dream goal or objective? If you don't have intention, then you don't have any inspiration or motivation to make that transition. So I think, as you know, I put a lot of years of practice into figuring all this out and a lot of study.
Yeah, and that's actually a very confronting question. It's much easier not to ask that question. What is my dream? What is my purpose? What do I really want? It's much easier just to go with the flow through life.
I tell people all the time, I say, I don't know what my dream is. I say, well, good. Do you know what you don't want? Because if you know what you don't want, then just go in the other direction. I don't want to be tired all the time. Good. Then don't do things that led to that. I don't want to be overweight. Good. Let's look at what caused that for you. I don't want to be sad. Let's look at what caused that for you. I don't want to be lonely. Great. Let's look at what caused that for you, etc. So the point I make to people is, look, you don't actually have to have your dream. You don't need to know your legacy, your life path. All you got to do is recognize what you don't want. And that's why I say, if you don't have a dream, get clear on what your nightmare is.
Yeah, I love that. And similarly, in my work, I'm wanting a man particularly, to identify his purpose. Okay, because once we identify your purpose, then we can build a life around that purpose. We can optimize your life so that it is in service of that purpose. So you can go to bed at the end of the day knowing that you're closer now. And that's a good feeling. But it doesn't have to be this the final answer to the question.
No.
Sometimes it's just a series of circles, and your purpose right now might be to lose 25 pounds, and then that'll take you one level deeper to the next thing, and to the next thing. So the purpose path is this series of circles that just get closer and closer and closer to your truth. But you got to start somewhere.
Rumi has a poem where he says, get lost in being lost.
Mm-hmm.
And what he's saying is that a lot of stuff Rumi says is paradoxical, but what he's really saying is, if you take this in context of our conversation, a lot of people put so much pressure on themselves to try to figure out what it is that I'm supposed to do, why am I here, etc. But Rumi's saying, get lost in being lost. Don't add pressure to the pressure.
Mm-hmm.
Just know that you're alive and focus on the things that you want to do and that you love to do.
Yeah.
And when it's kind of like you heard about Dustin DePerner from me. Well, the next thing you know, you're standing next to him, talking to him,
Yeah.
right? So when you gravitate toward the things that make you feel good and that make you feel connected, then they naturally lead to doors to more of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So getting lost in being lost means don't be your own worst enemy. Be aware of what it is that's happening when you're feeling good and doing the things you love to do. And then be like, I love to paint.
Mm-hmm.
So I get lost in being lost. I sit in front of a canvas. I don't know what the hell I'm going to paint. I don't sit there and go, oh shit, I don't know what I'm going to paint. I just start painting and I just say to my soul, let's paint. And I just see what the urge is. I think I'll just put some black on there. And then I think, maybe a square. And I'll put a square. I don't know where it's going. And the next thing you know, 5, 6, 8, 10, 12, 20, 30 hours later, I go, I don't even know how I painted that.
Who painted that?
Because quite honestly, I can't paint that good. So
Yeah.
someone got inside of me and painted. And I like it when they're here because I lose all track of time. I forget all about bills. I forget all about work stress. And I'm lost in being lost.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, people in our culture's kind of been tortured because the way we've been educated is based on outcomes. So it's always an outcome. And in our culture, they have made some fundamental mistakes, largely due to marketing by financing companies and people like that, and business moguls that are trying to get you to make them richer. And that's this belief, if you put X number of dollars in at X percentage of interest, X number of months from now, you're going to have this much money, like it's a guarantee. Well, we all know stock markets crashes, and we all know that COVID comes along, and we all know
Fires.
Fires,
Yeah.
and we know that people get caught sleeping with the wrong people, and their stock gets devalued or whatever. And so there's always an X factor. So this is where I remind people of Hegel's philosophical disposition on thesis, antithesis, synthesis. The idea is if I put this much money in, I'm going to have this much money out at this interest rate. That's the thesis. But the antithesis says just know that the universe is going to always throw surprises at you, and this is the Buddhist law of impermanence, right?
Mm-hmm.
Nothing's going to be like you think it is because there's many more things at play here than your mind can conceive of, such as each other, right? We're all co-contributing the reality that we're in, and we can't control other people's thoughts or desires or actions, but we can only control ours, but other people's lives affect ours. Whatever Donald Trump decides to do can affect the whole world, as many people's can. Bill Gates obviously can not only affect, but infect the whole world. How's that for tricky? So the point being is you have the thesis, then you just have to be open to the natural process of antithesis, which is what makes us honest about it being a real journey, a real experience. And then you come to synthesis. So, for example, if I invent a new widget, I think, I'm going to get rich off this thing. All I got to do is sell 1 million of them. But then you find out the damn thing breaks and the materials aren't made good enough and whatever. There's your antithesis. And that brings you back to the drawing board. So there's the pain teacher showing up to say, hey, your dream was incomplete. Let's work on this. And when you get to synthesis, you realize, wow, the journey was really worth it. I really learned a lot. I became more. I'm more whole. I'm more aware. I'm more alive.
Even the challenging parts were meant to evolve me.
They're there for evolution.
Yeah.
Right? And so then, now what Hegel missed in his thesis, which is rest. So everything goes in a cycle that rests. A pendulum always comes to a dead stop before it changes directions. So I added to Hegel's thesis. Thank you, Hegel, for letting me do that. Forgive me for the hubris. But we have thesis, my dream, antithesis, the challenges of manifesting the dream, synthesis, bringing the dream into fruition, And then we have to rest. Because in our culture, we keep going from dream to dream or goal to goal. And the next thing you know, you got lots of money, but you're spending it all on doctors and therapists because you're completely burned out.
And you never cultivated the capacity to enjoy the
what you
moments.
have.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's the rest phase is the celebration phase, really. And it's giving yourself permission to have emptiness in your life. And our culture is very afraid of emptiness. They're constantly trying to fill everything from their heads to their guts to their houses to their yards to their cars with stuff, which is a symbolic expression that they think that the stuff is going to compensate for the emptiness that they unconsciously associate with the experience of dying, which is based on a belief that death is the end. But if you really go deeper into your spiritual practice and deeper into your metaphysics, you realize there is no end and there is no beginning, because God has no beginning and end, and God is the source of all of it. So if you really say, okay, where does this all come from? And lo and behold, what do we find? Every time they build a bigger telescope, the universe is bigger than they thought. And now science shows pretty much irrefutably the whole concept of the Big Bang, which we all thought was the beginning, which we were told by scientists that the universe is expanding and expanding, and it's going to turn back and collapse on itself, and it's all going to be over. So people think, oh my God, it's all going to come to an end. But now what they show with the most advanced space probes is that when they look into the past, because when you're looking at older starlight, you're looking into the past, you should see younger and younger stars, right? Because you're looking into the past. So, in the past, your mother was a younger woman, wasn't she? So if you look back 40 years with a telescope, metaphorically, you'd see a younger woman there. But what do they find? They find stars of all ages, which means the universe is constantly giving birth to new stars and regenerating itself. And there's stars of every time scale there, which shows that the Big Bang concept is completely wrong. And there's many other things that also are involved in that. But what I'm saying is, if you start saying, okay, what's the belief behind that? What's the belief behind that? Then you actually find that you're believing what somebody else is telling you without doing your own investigation. And when you start actually investigating minds that are outside of the scientific paradigm, you see much deeper thinking going on that's being pushed out because it goes against the dogma.
Right.
So all I'm saying is that the whole concept of death is usually what makes people afraid of silence, because they associate it with death. But really, death and birth are really like two ends of a string, and when you tie it together, neither of them exists.
Yeah, I've often thought about meditation practice as the preparation for a good death.
Yeah, and a good death is the preparation for a good afterlife. If you don't live well, you won't die well. And if you don't spend time making room in yourself for more, then you end up stressing the hell out of yourself trying to create more when there's no room for more. It's like young men come to me all the time. How do you get multiple women? I say, well, you start by mastering a relationship with one. You don't even have room for another woman in your life. What are you going to do? You can't even handle the girl you got or the guy you've got. So my point is, you have to make room for what's in your life before you can bring more in, or all you're going to do is just kill yourself with more stress. And every time you do that, you have to meet the pain teacher with greater frequency. And if you're not careful, you end up drugging the hell out of yourself so you can survive the symptoms of your own cultural confusion.
I remember when I was I spoke earlier about being in Myanmar and being so struck by how authentically happy people were.
Yeah.
And it was a third world country and they're poor. And it just made me think, like, man, more is really a disease. We're always told that the next thing, the next accomplishment, the next paycheck, then you can be happy. But the reality is, it's right now is your only chance.
Yeah.
This is it. And everything that you want, really want, is available right now.
Not only that, if you look at what most of the accumulation of anything is, it's a symbolic representation that people equate to love. I love my car.
I love my jewelry. I love my clothes. I love my house. I love my money, right? But you see, the disconnect is that I'm only feeling the love when I have the house, car, the jewelry, the money, the hairdo, the status, the position. When in reality, if you make love with yourself, for yourself, and do the things you love to do, then what you find is a guy like me is really happy sitting and painting all day and couldn't give a shit what kind of car's in the garage or any of that stuff, because that's an act of making love, and it's up to each of us to find ways for making love, which is why Dr. Happy is the chief physician. Because if you don't focus on what's happy making for you, how do you know what to practice in order to keep yourself from the throes of depression and anxiety and indifference, right? But think about it. When you did a mandala for at my request. Now, what was the experience of painting that? That was your first one.
Yeah, I'd done one before, but never at such depth. And it was a beautiful experience. It was much like you described with painting. There was some resistance initially that I had to move through.
Cold water.
Right, but once I got into it and started moving the pencil, I had a compass, I had a ruler. I didn't know what I was going to paint, but I just started moving the pencil. And then that just kind of birthed this momentum that was coming through me. I wasn't painting it. And I got to the point where I became quite obsessed with it. I mean, I just wanted to keep working on it. It became really, I could feel my heart in it. And I think it came out better than I could have predicted. I didn't think I could really paint like that.
I was really surprised. Yeah. You mentioned to me that you hadn't really done much art. And so when I saw it, I'm like, well, it doesn't look like it. It looks like you've done a lot of art.
And it was really fun.
So that's the art spirit. And I think it's Henry Miller that says, the art spirit comes when you're adding life to life, right? So the experience you were having is adding life to life. You're not only where you get the joy of painting, but now you get to look at it forever, and it brings you right back to that experience every time you look at it. So it's sort of a symbol that taps you into the experience and the flow and the beauty and the creativity that's something magically beyond the thinking mind, because the thinking mind doesn't have the capacity to create that experience. So you're going beyond the thinking mind into what David Bohm would call the well or the stream of creativity, which is beyond mind. And this is where the whole Eastern concept of no mind really is trying to get us to, but the Western says, no mind, that's stupid. You'd be a zombie. It's like, sorry guys, but you missed the point. But, a great way for the Westerner to understand no mind is for anybody that's had this experience of passionate sexual engagement, where you lose your sense of your own boundaries and you merge into the other person so fully that you don't know if you're you or you're them. There's no identity anymore. There's just this experience of connection and flow and love and intimacy that's so rich and profound that it just fills you, right? It fills you full. And the point I'm making is nobody in that experience is thinking, God, I got a lot of stuff I got to get done. I really should get this over with.
Right, you're there.
And if you're doing that, then you're lousy in bed. I can guarantee it. I'm curious, because my approach to spirituality and metaphysics is fairly different. It's not something that you're likely to come across in books, because I did years and years and years of work and practice to synthesize a lot of concepts together. And with all these people you've studied with, what was your experience of being exposed to what I teach in the holistic lifestyle coaching program as far as a metaphysical or spiritual?
Well, what comes to mind immediately is how simple health is.
Yeah.
You really make it very simple for your students. You want to feel better, you want to look better, you want to be happier. These are the rules for life. If you deviate from them, you're going to have problems. If you follow them, a lot of your problems are going to dissolve. So the way you simplify very complicated topics. And I would say your authenticity.
Well, I just practice it.
Yeah, you are uniquely yourself.
I don't want to ever be caught telling somebody to do something that I don't do myself, or that I don't know from practical experience works. My ego's too big for that.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a lot of tools that I've gotten from the CHEK curriculum that I use with all my clientele about simple solutions to complicated problems that people are so quick to complicate things and looking for a cure. And it's like, well, what did you have for breakfast?
Yeah.
You know, what time do you go to sleep? Let's
Yeah.
take a look at your breath.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah. Are you drinking water?
Yeah. The more I learn about health, the simpler it all becomes.
Have you looked at your poop lately?
Yeah. How's it smell?
Yeah. How's it look? Does it
Yeah.
float? How easy was it to pass? I mean, somebody that knows what they're looking at when they look at their poop can usually get more information from their poop than they can from their doctor. And it's real information.
Right.
Because it's from you.
Right. You know, and the other thing is your physical health as a catalyst for your spiritual development.
Mhm.
That's what I really love about the CHEK curriculum. I remember an analogy you gave, I think, in HLC 3 last time I was in the class with you. Something to the effect of like, okay, you want to have higher states of consciousness or maybe leave your body. It's like a man who his home is in disorder and his wife has 4 kids and he's not making any money and he says, hey, I'm going to go on vacation. She says, the fuck you are? You ain't going anywhere. Okay, so that's a body that's in disharmony. It's not being well cared for. There's no attention given to the health of the physical. The other side of the coin is, okay, steaks are in the freezer. I'm working hard. You know I love you. I'm here for the children, but I need 2 days to go away. She'll say, God bless you. Go ahead. See you when you get back.
Yes, I'm safe.
Yeah. So it's like the physical health is a catalyst for the deeper experiences available in states of high concentration.
Well, the reality of it is your physical health is a very tangible manifestation of your actual consciousness. Matter is the condensation of consciousness. Your body is made of matter. Therefore, the health and the shape and the vitality of your body is the manifestation of your dominant beliefs, thoughts, and behaviors.
That's a tough pill to swallow.
Well, it's fact.
It's fact.
Yeah, it's just fact. Even David Bohm, one of my heroes, says, no man can do deep thinking without healthy rituals. Why? Because you're always distracted by all the things that your body needs and that your health is failing you. And, I'm tired all the time, or my body hurts, or my guts hurt, right? So if you don't ritualize your day to become clear on what is sacred to the health of your body, which is the temple that you live in, it's the only place you know for sure is yours, right? Mm-hmm. You might own a house that's perishable. It can catch on fire. You can lose it financially, stock market crash, loss of job, whatever. But, our body is where our soul and our spirit lives. And, one of the first things I do when people come to see me with trouble in their life is I walk out to the parking lot and look in their car. And generally, the way their car looks is a good image of the way their inner self looks, their mind looks. So I tell people, clean up your environment. Create the environment that is supportive of the direction you want your body to go. It's very hard to get off of gluten if you got gluten everywhere. Hard to get off alcohol if you got alcohol in the cupboards, and hard to quit smoking if you've got cigarettes staring you in the face all day, because the environment is, you're porous to the environment. You are the environment, right? You're 60% of the chlorine in a bathtub goes right through your skin like it's not even there when you sit in the bathtub or take a shower. So the point I'm just making, thoughts. I say something to you and it penetrates you whether you like it or not. You drink water and you're drinking everything that's in the water from the environment. So ultimately, when you realize that the way that you choose is a reflection of the way you believe, because all choices are the results of beliefs, then you say, okay, what I've created is the body that I have for sure. I can't blame anybody else for that. And even if you claim you got a genetic weakness from a test, I say, good, well then don't create an environment that guarantees you're going to find the weakest link in the chain. Be more intelligent than that. So anyhow, I really emphasize that in my teachings, because we have
some real issues in Christianity and even Judaism and some aspects of Islam and some aspects of Buddhism in which the body is made insignificant. It's dirty. It's to be, you're going to leave it behind anyhow. There's all sorts of different lines of thinking that all denigrate the body and the value of the body and the sacredness of the body. And the body is truly the most sacred thing that you know for sure because you have it every day.
Yeah,
and without it, what have you got?
That's the way in.
Yeah, it is the way in. And it's the way into the magic of what you really are, which turns out to be everything else. You know, we've been going for a while, but I'd like to just chat for a few minutes on your men's groups. Because I know that that's something you do a lot of and are have put some time and energy into, and you've had your own journey. The first thing I want to ask you is, what is your definition of a man? What is a man to you? How do you know when you're a man? What does it take to be a man in Michael's eyes?
Claiming responsibility for yourself. Claiming responsibility to clean up your little part of humanity and to heal and to become a refuge for the healing of the people in your life who depend on you.
In other words, be responsible.
Yeah, but the healing starts with you. And I think for a lot of guys, it's a confrontation with the reality that vulnerability is strength. That radical turning toward the possible pain or trauma that you've been successfully avoiding that's driving unskillful course of action in the world. Part of being a man is sitting down and turning toward that, inviting it in and healing. And the degree to which you can do that to yourself is the degree to which you can offer that healing presence to other people. But if you can't do it with yourself, you can't even see the pain in other people.
I meditated on, what a man is from in my own experience. And for me, a man is someone who says what he means what he says, and fulfills his obligations and commitments, and doesn't leave people hanging or run off on his children or those types of things. So there's a lot of big challenges in our not just our culture, but a lot of cultures today. I think a lot of them are the products of technology, unfortunately. So I'm curious. One of the things I'm really curious about as a guy that runs men's groups, what are some of the common challenges that men are having that come up in your men's groups? Like what's really ailing them or hurting them or leading them to seek your help?
Lack of direction in life, just completely oblivious to what they want to do. And so there's this kind of a listlessness that emerges.
Aloof.
And you just get stuck in that pattern. Emotional trauma that they may not be aware of, or they are becoming aware of it, but they don't know what to do about it. Struggles with women, struggles in intimacy, negative, afflictive self-talk, self-judgment, problems in business. A lot of no harmony in the relationship with the self. No self-love.
A lot of that has religious underpinnings, unfortunately.
Guilt, shame, and the illusion that I alone am the one who's struggling with this.
Right, yes.
Which then just becomes this prison. The thinking is that everyone else has it figured out. I am the only one that's struggling. And that's the beauty of building a community. You start to see that, well, my problems are not that unique at all. And many people are struggling with this. So that kind of opens the door for the healing.
How much of this do you think is coming from ineffective parenting or traumatic parenting?
Yeah, a lot. Yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone comes out of childhood unscathed.
No.
Everyone's parents are doing their best with the skills and tools that they learned how to be a parent from their parents. But that's the beauty of claiming responsibility for your healing. Because if you do that and you end maybe some patterns that you inherited, you won't pass them on. So you can heal your bloodline by healing yourself.
Jung says all children are tasked with the unfinished business of their parents' lives. And I think a lot of people take the victim role and, my life's the shits because mom or dad did this or didn't do that or
Right.
didn't give me this. But really, to become an adult means that to the degree you're aware of what your mom and dad didn't give you or didn't do themselves, you're very aware of what your work is.
Mm-hmm.
And that's your contribution not only to the family, but what is a family? It's the foundation of a society and a culture. So part of being a man, in my opinion, is realizing that fulfilling the unfinished business of your parents' life, meaning bringing wholeness to the experience, that you share that with the family. You say, this is, how I express myself artistically or musically, or this is, the business that I've started, and this is what I'm committed to because it matches my values, or whatever it needs to be in order to fill the gap of what was missing in your upbringing, in your environment, so that you don't fall into the victim trap or constantly sabotage yourself or turn into a prostitute where you just think that you've got to do shitty things to make money and justify it because you're too insecure to go out and do what you want to do and do what you love to do. Or you're worried about what mommy and daddy are going to say about what you want to do, which means that you're not a man yet. You're still a child. So what are some of the common things that you suggest for men to kind of pull themselves together?
Well, in the collective that I built, it's called Tribe Men's Community, international community. We have, I think, a couple of thousand members all over the world. And we meet for calls once a week. And I am one of the 3 founders in the collective. And my primary offering is the internal work. A lot of the stuff that I learned in the CHEK curriculum about self-management, caring for yourself the way you would care for someone you love, claiming responsibility for your health and wellness and happiness, and meditation. I also use that as grounds to teach martial art and martial art philosophy, because I think for a lot of the guys, one of 2 things is possible. Either they're very aggressive, like we talked earlier, and they don't have a healthy outlet for it, so they end up leaking that on people and projecting it and hurting people. But something very humbling happens when you engage martial art. Maybe you get rocked a few times, and to earn any skill, you have to get beat up a few times, and that's a humbling process. And so if you find the right gym and the right vibe, by the time you get any skill, you've been humbled, so you're a peaceful individual. Or the other possibility with guys is that they've been led to believe that a very natural, primal, inborn masculine aggression that lives inside of them is to be ostracized from their being. Yeah. So some guys, they need to wake that part of them up. It's vitality, it's vigor, it's claim what you want.
What Jung would tell you that is libido.
Yeah. And so you can find that through your body. It's not an idea. No. It has to be expressed through your body through movement. So a lot of the martial art drilling and practices are meant to wake that sleepy part of you up. And then it's not so you go out and use the techniques and fights. It's so that you can use them in service of your purpose.
You also, martial arts of all types, all combative sports, teach you to deal with discomfort and resistance. So if you don't learn to get a little bit comfortable with pain, then life's going to be you're going to be forever stuck in the back seat in the kiddie seat,
Yeah, because pain's promised.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's built into the system. It's a great quickener of consciousness.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on, I know you've had a variety of plant medicine experiences. How are plant medicines, do you feel, an aid or a hindrance to men that are trying to figure themselves out?
I think that they can be a hindrance for men who are trying to figure themselves out if they skip the mundane practices of ritualizing your day, like you said, of, doing a 10-minute meditation, of making sure you're eating well, of getting to bed, of all those things that will work. you're not willing to do that, but you're willing to drink some cactus juice and expect that that's a panacea that will just melt all your problems away. And I see people get stuck in that space and they just spiral out. Here's an analogy that you'll appreciate that came to me with regard to what's possible with plant medicine experiences. A daily meditation practice is the equivalent of learning the squat pattern, okay? A meditation retreat will be more intense. You'll be confronted with some stuff, totally worth doing, but it probably won't be a walk in the park, but do it. That's loading the squat pattern. Plant medicine is loading the squat pattern on an unstable surface. So there's opportunity for real stimulation and growth there if you're ready for it. But if you're not ready for it, you're going to get fucked up.
You're going to get injured.
Yeah.
You're going to get lost or injured, or some part of you is going to be confused, if not a lot of you.
So I think that the plant medicine that obviously plays here on planet Earth by God for the evolution of our consciousness, but it needs to be used very intelligently as a supplement to the daily practice of, steeping into stillness.
Yeah. I tell people plant medicines will show you where your work is at, whether it be healing mommy-daddy relationships or forgiving yourself or forgiving others, etc. But the plant medicines will not do the work for you. It's like, if a doctor tells you you've got cancer, hearing the diagnosis doesn't get rid of the cancer. It just makes you aware that you've got an opportunity right now to do something before it's too late. And so the plant medicines will show us where we have physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual blockages, and they'll often make it extremely clear, crystal clear.
Uncomfortably so.
Yes. So that you're, saturated in the reality of anything you've been hiding from yourself. It'll be right on the screen, dancing in your inner eyes, no escape. But they're not going to go home and make you say, I'm sorry. They're not going to go home and make you be more conscious of how you treat your lovers or your partners or your kids or your coworkers. They're not going to make you manage your money better. They're not going to stop you from making silly excuses about why you can't do things or why somebody else should do it, etc. So that's one of the real problems I see, male or female, is that people have this sort of drug-like mentality. Oh, if you take an aspirin, your headache will go away. Therefore, they think the problem's gone. So if you go do a shamanic ceremony and you do ayahuasca, you'll realize what you're all about and why you're here and what your purpose is, and everything will be great. And I say, yeah, then how come you've done 42 ayahuasca ceremonies and you got the same damn problems you did when you started? Because you haven't done anything about it.
So I'll pop into those circles very sparingly.
Yeah.
And when my soul tells me, I listen. But I will see the revolving door of the same people who continue to abuse, quite honestly, the medicines, but their lives are not changing. And actually, they're just becoming untethered.
Yes, yeah. There's a real risk in that. And the other thing is doing them too much. Generally, my experience as a proper plant medicine ceremony or shamanic ceremony has a fairly strong effect. An effect where it opens the door for you to make change easier because you're still kind of viscerally aware of what you were shown for about 3 months. So if you keep stacking journey on top of journey, what happens is you're opening so many doors and you're becoming aware of so much inside of yourself, it leads to sort of a paralysis by exposure. Like, oh God, no, this, that, I got to do this, I got to forgive that person, I got to stop doing this. And so what happens is people just feel like
overwhelmed by how much there is to do.
Overwhelmed. And the other thing is that because the plant medicines break down the default mode network and they can open you up to other dimensions of reality, whether it be the astral plane or coming into contact with people in the afterlife or any number of experiences, to fusing you into nature and activating magical consciousness, so you all of a sudden realize that trees are talking to you, and plants are talking to you, and animals are talking to you, and all these kind of neat things. But,
So all of a sudden you realize the trees are talking to you and you can have a great relationship with trees. But if you keep doing the plant medicines, and the next thing you know, the stars are talking to you, and the next thing you know, this is. So what happens is it actually is like trying to watch many televisions at one time.
Mm-hmm.
You don't, if you don't bring it into a state of integration where you say, okay, how do I bring this experience into my relationship so that it actually becomes an expression of who I really am, not an experience that I had drinking a bunch of ayahuasca or doing LSD or MDMA.
Getting high.
Right. Then, so what happens is if you don't take 3 months, on average, at least for most people, to really get clear on what it is that the medicine taught you and what was the doors it opened for you and what's it suggesting and how am I going to implement that strategically into my life so that there's an objective change, so that when I go to do it the next time, I don't feel guilty about the fact that now I've got more to do and more possibilities, but I'm not doing any of them, right? So, once you start opening dimensional gates like that, you can actually, and I've had too many people come to me to count, that they actually get into what's really a very schizophrenic state because they can't tell what's real anymore. Because as you know, you can have plant medicine experiences that are so vital and real that being sober, if I want to use that word, I mean, not having them in your system feels almost as though this is a sleepy, dreamy reality. So you can get these very, very intense experiences of reality. And if you can't integrate that back into this reality and you keep doing it, then you actually don't feel alive in this plane. You only feel alive when you're on some kind of drug.
That's no way to live.
No. So, any kind of offerings that you'd like to offer the listeners?
So within the men's community tribe, we're going to be hosting a online intensive. Typically, we do intensive experiences a few times a year on location, residential retreats. But unfortunately, with the way things are this year, we've moved to an online platform, which is good because we'll have more people. But that's going to be on November 13th, 14th, 15th. And I started to say earlier, my primary offering in that collective is self-mastery, meditation, self-management. I have a colleague, Dave Burns, who teaches about the path of business as a legitimate vehicle for awakening. So to bring
it's legitimate.
Yeah, it's legit.
Trust me, I know.
Yeah, and he's a man who's done quite well for himself. He's teaching what he does, and he's helped me tremendously with my business. And then our other colleague there, my brother Justin Pierce, he teaches intimacy. And he has a beautiful, 10-plus year relationship with his woman in a world of chronically single tantra teachers. He's an individual who's walking the walk. So between self-management, business, and intimacy, I'd like to think we cover all the bases of what a man might be struggling with. So we'll take a deep dive over the course of those days, and guys can call in. That'll be on the website, tribemenscommunity.com. And then my website is savageandsaint.com. That's where I work with my individual clientele. So if anyone wants to reach out there, or Instagram, Savage and Saint.
How long does the process go, the men's group?
It'll be probably half a day Friday, all day Saturday, all day Sunday.
Okay, so it's like a 2.5 day immersion type experience.
Yeah, and we talked a lot about rituals, the importance of rituals. So we'll be introducing a lot of rituals that a man can implement in his daily life to optimize his health, happiness, well-being, progress on the purpose path, and get right.
Good. What's the cost of the adventure?
We haven't settled on a number yet. I think it'll be somewhere around $150, $200.
That's very fair. Well, what a great journey we've had together.
Oh, man. I just can't stress how happy I am to be here. I remember at the last HLC3, I said, Paul, I'm going to be on your podcast.
Yeah.
You said, and I quote, "Okay, bud, go out there and do something, and I'll have you on." I said, I am doing something. So,
Yes.
man, this is a big moment for me, man. I really love and respect you, and I'm so grateful for you to invite me on here and have a chat.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Appreciate everything you're doing. And, once you got in touch with me and I learned of all the things you'd been doing and how you've been applying the training so that I could see that you were, a living embodiment of it, I said, okay, it's time to share Michael. You had plenty we could have shared a long time ago, but I really need the confidence of knowing that anybody that I share on the podcast
is authentically living what it is that they're trying to inspire others to do, or we just have more illusions added to our illusions, and it might sound really cool, but it doesn't take anybody anywhere. So, you met my criteria, so great job, and keep sharing your love with the world. And I love what you're doing, and I think that one of the things that I love is that you're so diverse in your studies and your practices. You're very well-rounded, and I think that's what we need, teachers to be well-rounded. Who cares if you're a genius at physics, but you don't know how to eat and sleep and take care of yourself? 'Cause
Right.
pretty soon you're going to be a codependent. Someone else is going to have to take care of you, and your physics brain is going to go right down the toilet, as an example. So I'm just grateful. I always love seeing it when my students really come through the Institute and embrace the teachings and change their lives and inspire a lot of other people to change their lives. And I knew I knew from within 10 seconds in the classroom with you, okay, this guy's he's making something out of himself. He's going somewhere. There's way too much fire in there. And his questions are way too good to be somebody who's just a intellect. I could see you're really taking what I would say and weighing it up against Shinzen and all these other people. And I love it when my students will ask me questions that are almost like they're putting me in checkmate. But I say, there's more moves on the board than you realize, Grasshopper. So let's move a little bit here. And so you were fun for me because you made teaching for me exciting. Because as you can imagine, when you've said the same things 20,000 times, and also it's challenging as a teacher because, I'll share something that Osho and Steiner both said. Interestingly enough, two guys that never knew each other. They couldn't have, because Steiner was long dead before Osho was ever here. But both of them said in their teachings that the most challenging, well, they said it slightly different, but they both said the same basic thing. They said the most challenging thing for them is their students constantly complaining that what they were learning wasn't working when they weren't doing any of it. And so, and that really is a modern problem, because we have an intellectually driven culture that thinks just because it can say the words, it's mastered them. And that leads to lots of problems in business, lots of problems in spiritual development, religion, pretty much anywhere. And, and also with plant medicines, because a lot of people have God experiences. The next thing you know, they're talking like mystics and saints, but acting like idiots. And I've had to pull some of my students aside and say, look, if you're going to talk that way, you better live that way, because all you're doing right now is damaging the validity of plant medicines by sounding really saintly and cool, but obviously not living in alignment with those words you're using. All you're going to do is be the coolest sounding guy in a coffee shop that can't make a living and can't keep a relationship.
Anybody can read a couple of books and talk the lingo, man. That's not so difficult to do.
No, it's just parroting.
It's the walk in the walk. That's why when I find somebody like you who's walking the walk, I listen up.
The thing that keeps me honest with myself the most is I have to sleep with me every night. I got to go to bed with this guy. And if I can't feel good about who he is, it's really hard to sleep. And I don't want to be in that bed. And I don't want to have anyone to have to be in bed with me if I'm not in that state. Because if I don't want to be with me, then how can I expect anybody else to want to be with me? And so I've always had this need to feel good about what I teach people, because I've tested enough times to know chances are very, very good that if a student does what I'm teaching them, they're going to get the results I'm getting, because ultimately we're all human and we all have the same basic needs and we're all here on the same planet. So, when you understand that we're all operating in the same field of gravity under the same laws, the laws of relationship, the laws of love, the laws of creativity, the laws of business, most problems are really just not. As Arthur M. Young says, the first thing you have to do is learn how to work with the laws of the universe. Then you can create beyond them. But criminals and people that try to take shortcuts like biohackers haven't committed themselves to the laws of a body or the laws of relationships
or the laws of business. They're trying to hack the laws. Someone who's a master, you take an Alex Gray who's mastered the laws of artistic expression, he can do things that even the great artists go, how in the world did he do that? So that's creating beyond the laws. And that's when you really tap into your co-creative potential to work with the universe as a co-creator. But first you got to learn the laws. And that's really a lot about becoming a man and becoming a woman or an adult. And becoming a contributor to society is not taking shortcuts, but doing the work to learn the laws. And I spent a lot of my life rehabilitating people from very serious problems, be they world-class athletes or your average person or injured workers. And I had to learn the laws because you can't take a person who, let's say, has broken the laws and restore them into harmony with the laws if you don't know what the law you're harmonizing them to is. And having had lots of injuries myself and had very little help from doctors, unfortunately, not that I'm anti-doctor, but just, what do you do when you're an athlete and you're all broken up and the doctors say, well, you really shouldn't be exercising or you shouldn't do that, or why do you get into a boxing ring? Don't you know that's stupid to let people hit you in the head? I'm like, are you kidding me? That's all the advice you've got for me? Right? You don't get it? Why do you ride motorcycles that fast? That's not very safe or intelligent.
Got the need for speed, Doc.
I'm a motorcycle racer, doctor. That's like saying, why do you hold on to sharp knives? That could be potentially dangerous. You shouldn't do surgery for people.
Right.
So anyhow, great journey. Hope you guys all enjoyed it. And I'm grateful that Michael was able to share some practical tips we can all use. And I think in closing, you'd agree, any one of those tips can take you a long way if you just practice it.
Yeah, you really only need one technique that can take you all the way to the finish line.
People think, you've got to keep studying and taking all these courses. Look, if you get good at flipping coins, you can get enlightened for 25 cents, meaning flip your thoughts over. Look at both sides, be honest about which one serves you, and put your energy and your heart there, and you're off to, great expansion. So in closing, try any one of those tips for a month and be honest about it and watch your whole life change.
Aho.
Hey, I hope lots of guys join your men's group, and thanks for doing all the work you've done to grow yourself so you can earn your way to the podcast. And I wouldn't doubt if it's the beginning of lots of podcasts for you.
I hope so.
So maybe one day you'll have your own.
Thank you, Uncle Paul. Love you.
Yeah, baby, love you. Lots of love, everybody. Thank you to the sponsors for their love and support. Thank you, all of you, for anything you purchase from the sponsors, because every time you do that, you support me in doing the work to create the podcast for you and help our podcast team and all the management and all the things behind the scenes, because there's a lot going on that doesn't meet the eye. And also, you're supporting the values that the podcast is built on, and all the sponsors have very, very high values that are in harmony with mine. And if you're buying their products, that means they're in harmony with you. And harmony is a high form of love. So thanks for all the love you guys share with me by being here and listening and participating and bringing it into the world. Aho.
Thank you for listening to Living 4D with Paul CZECH and today's guest, Michael Holt. You can find Michael online at savageandsaint.com and on Instagram at savageandsaint. Follow Paul on Instagram and Twitter at Living4D Podcast or on his YouTube podcast channel, youtube.com/Living4D with Paul CZECH. And you can watch more on Paul's blog at paulczechsblog.com and the CZECH Institute's new media site, chekiva.com.